Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We are going to talk about automation, but not only automation. We wanted to give you tips and best practices on methodologies for successful process automation. And just let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Delphine Coille. I've been working for Bonitasoft for the last 6 years, first as a customer success manager, and now as an evangelist and community manager. And today I thought that it would be really interesting to tell you about my 15 years of experience in the quality, process automation, improvement, optimization environments. And I'm really pleased today to be with Coille Winkler. Coille, I will let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Delphine. So yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for joining. And hopefully it's going to be very interesting and practical. So we have a lot of topics to discuss and to present. So my name is Delphine mentioned, Coille Winkler. Working at NSI, NSI Soluciones, where we from Panama basically partner with Bonitasoft and cater to the regional market in everything Bpm, RPA, ECM. And with Bonitasoft, of course, everything related to BPM. We are also from Panama hosting the APPMP. So that's the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, where we dedicate ourselves to training, coaching, and certifying BPM professionals. Yeah, and with that out of the way, let's start.
Yes, let's start. So we are going to shut down our cameras just to make sure you can listen to us correctly, but we wanted to say hello, and then we will maybe put the camera on again during the question session. Talking about questions, as we want it to be as much interactive as possible and make sure that we can share our experience, we invite you to ping us or ask a question directly in the chat, in the question chat panel. And maybe if you want to share something about your own experience, feel free to do it as well. We will be happy to open the mic. So let's start now. I shut down my cam. So as an introduction, why are we talking to you today about digital transformation project based on the BPM solution? Because when I've been working in this area, being at Bonitasoft, talking to people, to consultants, to partners, to customers, I realized that it was important as well to talk about methodologies and not only about tools and developments. So we decided to scan through the best practices and common issues of a business process optimization project in 5 chapters. This one is the first chapter of this series that will go from before you start your project until the production and what you are going to do afterwards, and going through each step based on Bonita. For example, how you implement with Bonita, what are the best practices for development, and so on. For any chapter, if, for example, you do not feel you would be the best person and you are not relevant, we encourage you to talk to your teams, because maybe someone from your team will be interested in a next chapter. So today we are going to share our experience and our feedbacks on our customers' projects, partners' projects, on the challenge, and especially the human challenge that is a project, an implementation project based on BPM. So let's start. Let's start with the type of project. Well, we can start and ask us the question of what is really this kind of business process automation and optimization. Is it a typical IT project, Coille?
Well, I mean, as you already stated, laying out the foundation and looking at preparing everything, that's one of the key questions you have to ask yourself. Looking at BPM, business process management itself, it kind of implies that besides looking at things IT, you also have to look at conceptual things, structures, people, business goals, and methodologies. So it in fact is not just as you state here, pushing or migrating something old to a new system or just the system itself. It combines various factors. So you have things like IT, of course, which is crucial, which is very important, but also all the other components you have to take into account. And that's actually,
Yeah, I totally agree.
yeah, and that's actually the very first failure many people that start with automation do, looking at the whole initiative just as a simple IT project. Absolutely. It's
Yeah, I totally agree, because most of the time when you think about automation, business automation project, people think about tools. Sometimes they think about ERP, so they think computer science, they think IT. But I totally agree with you that it's really larger, and it's talking about methodology, about organization. And maybe you can explain us, Kai, a bit why it's like that, and what is BPM about.
well, you don't have to necessarily overcomplicate everything. So many of the things we do when we implement BPM initiatives have to do with common sense, right? So a lot of things are things you would do naturally anyways. But to lay it out in a structural fashion, you would divide at least between those two components. BPM more in the sense of a framework, a methodology. So basically what we do, and the BPMS, which kind of signifies everything related to the technologies, the underlying technologies. So there you have the BPMS suite or system that kind of powers or leverages the effects of automation itself. So in the methodology side of things, when you look at what we do, you will confront components during process automations where you define business KPIs, things you want to do better when you talk about automation. So the effects of automation, saving times, saving efforts, and so forth. So you define KPIs, you define a framework how to measure those KPIs, you define service level agreements, also things that kind of surround the goal, the business goal, and then you go over to the BPMS or the technology itself and kind of leverage that, implement that with the technical tools. So those are the base components you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and from what I saw, it always impacts several departments, teams, and that's really a real change in the way to work, not only a typical IT project. And that's maybe what we can see as well now. Oh, sorry, I went through 2 slides. When we talk about automation, here we cannot say it's simply automate a process, just say we come from manual to automation. We saw that it's really a long-term transformation. It's a continuous process. It's a continuous improvement. If you want to optimize, to improve SLAs, improve your quality, you will do it continuously. And that's something that exists for a while. We all know that. It can be obvious. But when it's implemented, it's not always obvious, I guess. Another very important point I see, and that's something that we talk about those days, is the fact that BPM is really using components as part of the process and integrate different types of components. But for example, to those nowadays, we talk about automation, and that's a kind of buzzword those days. And most of the people, when they think automation today, they think RPA sometimes. But just as a parenthesis, I would like to say that it's quite different. If I take the example of a call center, call centers use robots, and I would like to take the example of one customer I had that was a senior care management call center. And the fact is that they wanted to give the best service possible, and especially make sure that the calls would be assigned by an agent as quickly as possible to make sure that the people would not be in danger or would not lack anything. Sorry, when they called. So what they did is combine robots with BPM, and that's exactly how it works to optimize. You cannot automate complex tasks with robots. When you use a robot, it will just replace a simple task with automation, and then you can combine it with BPM process to optimize the rest of the process. And that's what they say. What do you think, Care, about this overall transformation on your side?
Well, there's several things. I mean, yeah, if you look at the cycle you showed in the previous slide, yeah, I think there maybe if you go one slide or two slides back,
yeah.
Here, for example, the keyword, as you rightly mentioned, is iteration. So iteration is one of the other or additional key concepts you have to take into account in everything BPM. So that's basically also a narrative you will hear all over again when we talk about best practices in BPM. So you don't necessarily do everything at once, but you have a kind of continuous life cycle. And that has also to do with the transformation. Yeah, talking about buzzwords, right? Like you mentioned, there are buzzwords for automation, RPA, robotics, and so forth. Yeah, or BPM a couple of years back. Yeah, and I don't think necessarily the transformation is meant to be with a single initiative, so that you basically purchase a BPM tool, go ahead and implement all the processes at once, and finalize a huge project with a digital transformation. That's usually not how it happens. So one of the best practices to gather a continuous success is basically go and iterate progressively and build on top of each iteration to make it better. So you get to a transformation at a certain degree or at a certain point, but not necessarily at once. So that's why the continuous cycle is so important. And also what you mentioned, the coexistence. Sorry, the coexistence of robots and other systems. So right now, RPAs, all the hype, and rightly so. I mean, there are a lot of good things you can do with robotics, and with iterations, integrations. BonitaSoft has a lot to offer, right? For example, the UiPath integration, the native UiPath integration, UiPath has with BonitaSoft, and vice versa, where you can basically integrate an end-to-end process into microservices. So microservices perfectly can be a bot. In your example, if you have a call center and you want to create a bot that basically captures the event of, hey, there was somebody who called, kick off a process, an end-to-end process. So the bot will be the microservice kicking off an end-to-end process. That works perfectly. Or here in this graphic, you see that the BPM usually, if you look at the effects of automation, right? Yeah, when we talked about defining KPIs, service level agreements, define the goals, the business goals. The effects of automation usually come from saving time, and saving time by automating policies, calculations, and integrations. So that basically the BPM allows you to have a single point of entry, a single user interface, but behind the scenes, a typical successful project or process integrates to a bunch of things, be it an ERP or legacy system like an RPA or an enterprise content management, a CRM, a product inventory management or digital asset management like PIM, artificial intelligence, business intelligence, so that you basically can have a single form, do whatever you have to do end to end, but behind the scenes you have all those vertical integrations to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And now that we have talked about, well, overall BPM codes, methodologies, but also about how we see BPM and how it can be integrated, I think maybe we can share with everybody our experience and get feedbacks. So we wanted to tell you about few pitfalls that we thought would be good to avoid, methodologies, best practices, and common sense to be successful. Okay, we don't think we have the God reality, and really we know that maybe some concept might look obvious, but in the reality we still see lots of issues done by companies when they implement this kind of projects. That's why we thought it would be interesting today to talk to you about that. And to start with the first one, well, that's my opinion, and that's what I saw. When a project is too ambitious, it's quite difficult. And to illustrate that, I wanted to talk about the fable of La Fontaine. I don't know if people know that. The frog who aspired to become as big as an ox. Okay, what it is really a frog knowing an ox that was really big, really strong, and the frog wanted to be the biggest and the strongest. But because the frog was really ambitious, I really wanted to be bigger. But the fact is that doing that, she died. And we don't want our process to die, of course. So if you want to start your process, if you start with the biggest and the more complex, because you say, yes, that's the best process, that's the biggest process of the company, we are going to show it and show what we can do, and it will have a lot of impact. Be careful of not being too ambitious, because if you start too big, and if you want to do everything at once, it might be risky. Don't you think, Kay?
Yes and no. First of all, the frog is great. So that frog looks very French. Look at the T-shirt with the blue stripes.
Yes,
So
of
basically,
course.
yes, yeah. I mean, there are two schools of thought, yeah, and usually in our region, so yeah, in developing economies, yeah, people that drive initiatives for automation usually also face the challenge of how to justify a project, how to get the return on investment, yeah, and to present to the board, basically that's how much it's going to cost, and that's what it's going to take to automate, and then looking for the justification in order to go ahead and execute this initiative. That in correlation that with being the first initial steps of automation is always the hardest, right? You have the learning curve, you have to buy the servers, licenses, and whatnot. You have to train people. It's always more expensive at the beginning, and it gets cheaper down the road with iterations. So the risk is basically searching for a too small project at the beginning that doesn't yield necessarily the return of investment in order to justify the next steps. So either you do only a single project and then it dies off because there was no measurable return of investment, or it doesn't get approved in the first place. So usually our recommendation most of the times is the other way around. Go for a very aggressive, very visible, very measurable process.
With a lot
So
of business value. That's what you say.
yes, exactly. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, very big. And I agree with you. You have to show business value. So if we think about what you said and what I said, maybe we have a way to find the right process. Look at it. We want to maximize the business value and show the quickest return on investment possible. That's what you said, no?
Exactly.
You want to show that it works. But also, you don't want to have your developers fail on their first project, otherwise they won't do it again. You want to make sure that you take into account the learning curve, as you said. And for the users, we don't want to avoid the tunnel effect and be results oriented. So why not choosing a process that will bring a lot of business value, but not too complex? That's easy to say. Yes, we know. but but it depends on each company and each. For example, Kai, do you have an example? I would say 10 to 15 tasks. at the beginning, maybe?
Yeah, there's a good rule, and you're absolutely right. So balance is key, and it's not easy. And usually there's a rule to not exceed a maximum of 12 maximum certain tasks for an initial process. That doesn't mean you're not able to create additional processes and additional tasks or sub processes, right? But try to limit yourself, looking at the process complexity you laid out there, at a process that doesn't exceed some 12, 13 steps at most.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a good example. Quickly, just to quickly, a big French industrial called Léon Gros. They are building offices. They chose this kind of process, quite quick to implement. In 2 months, they had implemented it, and it was really important because it was building the group for which is the first main step when you want to build an office. So they saw really the benefits for that. It was quick. In 2 months, the process had been implemented, and it was not so difficult to implement. This way, people were happy. They saw the return on investment, and the direction invested more on new processes.
Right. Very good. Very good.
So if we follow what you said, then if you want to have a quick return on investment, how do you work?
Well, and that's just an abstraction. So yeah, one of the key questions here to follow the logic is how do I measure success? Yeah. Now that I know what to look for, how do I measure it? Yeah. And one of the method, and it's by no means meant to be the only one, is kind of segregate the process into its basic components. Yeah. Here we see the three key components, basically for deriving from the definition of a process to be a conversion of a given input with a sequence of structured activities in order to achieve a desired output. So with those three components in mind, you would want to look at optimizations on all three of them. So on an input level, you would like to want to optimize the quantity. And depending on what kind of process you have processes that are focused on maximizing the output. You do as much as you can, usually commercial processes. Yeah, so you want to sell as much as you can with the least amount of effort and input in that sense. But also you have other processes where you don't necessarily care to maximize the output, where you basically want to do what you have to do with the least amount of input. Those are typically back offices or supporting processes. Things like vacation requests, purchase requests. So while we all like vacations, it's not necessarily our goal as a company to maximize and give everybody vacation at once, right? So that is the other kind of process, but same structure all nonetheless. So you have those three components. You want to optimize the quantity of things you have to use as an input, be that effort, workforce, technical input, licenses and whatnot. The quantity, quality, and time optimization on an activity level, where you basically want to do things faster if you can, with better quality, meaning with more automation. If you automate more and the process does basically takes care of quoting, calculating, applying the policies automatically, you save time and you will become more consistent with your output, right? And do that faster. And that translates always into some sort of an economical optimization, and measure that. So the key here is also, as promised, the continuing narrative about continuous improvement. So that is not meant to be a linear thing, but focus on the first KPIs to be measured at the beginning, put that in place, automate that, and keep measuring. Measure the results and improve from there. So iterative approaches.
Yeah, I get the point, but you agree with me that if when you start, you don't analyze and measure the benefits you want to have, you can do what you want. You could totally miss out what will be improved, no?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that happens more often than not. And what you mentioned is key: common sense it's all too often not so common. So yeah, you're right. You have to.
Oh yeah, because as you said, common sense is not so common, because I have seen plenty of projects where people were starting, we want to automate. And I have a good example for that. A French administration wanted to get rid of paper. So they were said, okay, we get rid of all paper on this process. It was a kind of healthcare process, okay? They started automating. So they said, okay, this task is manual, done by this department. I automate it in this tool. I use BPM to integrate all tools, and I automate everything. Yeah, great. But at the end, the department were doing things twice sometimes, because that not thought about the change it would imply to automating a tool and not using paper, where people before were just standing on, going to the next desk and saying, okay, can you help me and sign on this document, please, so that I can go on and do my next task. So if you don't think before and you don't analyze, maybe you can do things that are totally unuseful on your project.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Delphine.
So Kai, I will let you maybe conclude on this and talk about the value-based approach that we really recommend.
Sure. So that's yet another abstraction. But if you dive into if you zoom in the what, now that we know what to measure, but also we want to analyze what to do, the value-based approach can look something like this. Yeah, and that is also a very recycled methodology. You see that for continuous improvements a lot. Sometimes you see such a circle in Scrum initiatives. So that's nothing really new, but it applies. And it's very powerful. So basically, depending on where you stand with the process, if you are a beginner implementing your first automation, your first process, your first BPM, you most likely are going to start with the design slice of that circle, where you start and look at the process as is, looking at the process end to end, basically defining what am I doing right now in detail, what is good and what has to be enhanced, prioritized, and measured. And that kind of bleaches into the analyze component. So where you go with that is to define and to translate into numerical values, measurable values, what exactly you want to automate with that first initial step. And optimize as much as you can. And the optimization, as mentioned before, comes from the automation effect. So optimizing here means things like integrating to an ERP, integrating to our CRM. So if you want to populate a form field with typing in Delphine as a name, populating all the Delphine information we already have from an ERP or CRM system, that's an optimization. Put that in place, put that in production, and start monitoring. And based upon the delta, be positive or negative, start improving on your design. So continuous cycle, very basic, but it has to be put in place if you basically want to approach the value-based methodology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this goes with an iterative cycle. Sorry, one of our banking customer in Switzerland has exactly implemented that and they have set success metric at the beginning of the first loop, and regularly at the end of one loop they were measuring success metrics. So they were monitoring regularly the improvement, and then they were adapting the process and their design. That's exactly what you said. And then they were keeping an eye on what they were doing and not forgetting where they wanted to go. And that's something we are going to see just after. But before we talk about where we want to go and objectives, I think it's important as well to remind people that this kind of project is not only, and that's what we said at the beginning, an IT project. So I chose this this picture because I like the movie, and also because it's really interesting as an illustration to say, okay, you need a pilot in your plane to make sure that you are going to land on correctly. And that's where we need the not only the CIO of the IT team, but only the input and the commitment of all the business team, business directors, and also the teams and key users, for example. I don't know, Kay, if you
Yeah, and I like the movie too.
yeah,
So
you like the movie too, no?
yeah. So but yes, no, you're right. What you want to make sure, and that's one of the other common sense components, right? You want to make sure that everybody who's kind of involved, we spoke a lot about end-to-end processes. So if you look at it from a very high level, end-to-end means the whole value chain. So if you go through a process that's really end-to-end, it kind of starts with a customer request and ends with a made product or service, and touches all the departments in between, including providers. So you absolutely need a representative for each component on board, so to say, on the plane, in order to make it work. And there are several approaches for that. The best one in our experience is implementing a lot of banking processes, mission critical processes, telco, and so forth, is to make sure that you have a matrix approach. So not necessarily the project itself has to reflect the hierarchy of the company, but the involved roles. So you usually have somebody from the business side on different levels. So you have process owners, which are more on the managerial level, people that kind of own the department, own the business goals. And below those business owners, you have the subject matter experts that don't necessarily know all the process end to end, but specific key components that comprise the process, or the process is comprised of. In addition to that, you have of course, IT personnel. So you have IT managers, but within IT, you also have people that are in charge of the databases, the integration level, security, business analysts that look at the KPIs and data warehouses in order to store the information a process produces into a repository, things like that. So basically, lay out an entire structure, and in the upcoming webinars, we go into further detail what specific roles those are and how you can organize them. But here for now is think about roles, making sure that everybody who is some sort of has a relation or a stake in the process has to participate.
Yeah, exactly. And the first step is to validate and share the objective together and the expected value between business stakeholders and business IT, and as you said, at all level of the hierarchy. I would add here that it's important to make it simple and clear, the objective, to make sure that you stick to the objective and you don't spend 80% of your time on 10% of the value. I guess you already saw this kind of
Right.
of pitfall, no?
Exactly, and that's another golden rule, like the one we mentioned, that for a process don't exceed necessarily 12 to maximum 13 process steps. There's a rule that states that don't automate the exception, automate the rule. So if you want to really get a return of investment and have the effect of automation, and that's usually what happens with beginners very often, once being very motivated, which is a good thing. They try to automate everything, thinking a lot about the exception of things that eventually can happen, or that eventually happen every once in a while in the operation. Those are things, hey, if you have an exception and that happens only once in a while, you don't have rules for that, you don't have a roadmap for that, manage that as a case or manage it manual. There's no way in hell you can get a return on investment from that, right? So stick to what you do in volume, repetitive, and where you have a structure, rules in place. Automate the rule, not the exception. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just as to illustrate what you were saying, make sure that you pay attention to the quality and the skills of the resources that you are going to put on the project. not only technical team, development team, but also, as you said, you really have to make sure that you have the right business team, the right business users. And to do so, something we use at Bonitasoft, so I wanted to share our own experience to make sure that those people are collaborating and that you identify the right people. Sorry. You have to make sure that you understand the users and the people. So here you see that you have two people, Delphine and Coille, but how can they collaborate and talk together? Because we have totally different kind of profile. We use a methodology that maybe some of you have already heard about in the marketing area, but which is totally different from marketing for us, which comes from a user-centric conception, which is called personas. What is that? It's the way to build virtual people, virtual persons, profiles, depending on how they would react and use, on what they like, on what is their profile, and how you are going to address them. The goal here is really to meet the requirement and to maximize the user experience of your platform. So for example, if you develop an application, it will be used by different types of profile. For example, you can have an operation manager that is going to manage your team. You can have a business analyst, which is different profile. That's the kind of profile we have in Bonitasoft. But you can also have someone we call Cindy, for example, which is a citizen developer, which is someone in the business area that is kind of developing, touching a bit of technology. So we try to identify them and put a kind of virtual identity card. And for example, here, Delphine, myself, I am a citizen developer. I have a very experience in the B2B field. I'm not an engineer at all, but I learned I'm really interested in technology, in everything related to computing, IT, BPM, quality, and so on. I could have been a developer, but I'm not. And in my previous life, I've been project manager, I've been quality manager or business analyst. I'm able to manage technical resources, but also all the kind of resources, human resources. And I expect from an automation project that it helps you making sure that everything works. And in order to quote that, you have what I would say an automation project is like a jungle expedition. You never know what threats await you, but you fall in a state of wonder when it all comes together. And as a citizen developer, I will be I will interest Coille, because Coille is the developer. Don't you, Coille?
Yeah, not really, but I'm flattered. I'm flattered. So first of all, that's how I look when I don't shave. So and I feel young with 29 years old. But yes, absolutely, and it's very innovative what we can use with such a methodology. First of all, personas. That's something, as you see, it's very easy to do. If you look at my profile here, if I would be like a mere technical oriented person, or look at Delphine more from a product management profile, then it becomes clear how to redact the requirement, right? How to write it down. Yeah. And if we use an approach like Kanban, Scrum, in order to organize our projects, the cards, the user story now can be formulated around those profiles. It makes it far easier. For example, here, me being a technical person, I would like to hear about bits and bytes, right? So if somebody tells me the user story, I don't want to necessarily see a PowerPoint presentation, but I want to see an XML schema. I want to see how the data is flowing. I want to see the API distribution or the architecture, instead of maybe something more end user or front end oriented. And with that in mind, I think it's very easy to do, and it's very effective. And also, if you look at that, you don't have to limit that for only for the internal team. So if you, for example, have a matrix, a project matrix, where you have a project manager, you have a business analyst, you have a subject matter expert, 1, 2, 3, and the business owner, all of them have a card like this one, like Coille the developer. You can also extend that for the process users themselves. That can be including external users, that can be your customers or your providers. In the end, it helps and it goes a long way to understanding in depth how your customer, internal or external, how your peers work and function. And the time you spend doing that saves you a lot of time when executing the project. And that doesn't have to be limited to BPM initiatives. It just so happens to be very effective there too.
Yeah, especially as if we think about this kind of project, it's a real cultural change. So if you know this kind of persona and you can address them, you can also address the change and help them adapt, no?
Exactly, and their culture components altogether, things, the pitfalls we mentioned to overcome, communicate them effectively. One thing we see a lot of times when users create their budget and their project structure, they try to make like one process to rule them all. They kind of come up with the OmniChannel process that covers everything. And that goes directly into all the pitfalls we mentioned before, like having a monster Frankenstein of a project that never ends, is highly complex, never nobody really understands, and most of the times engaging into a cultural change requires also understanding the iterative process to do several steps, but also kind of pre-commit that there's going to be more than one BPM initiative, being BPM more culture itself than a technology. Absolutely.
So if we want to kind of conclude and launch also, well, ideas for our next slides, Kai, sorry, what would you tell us about all that we were talking about? Iteration, think agile, be agile.
Yeah. So to bring it all together, to consolidate it, key components, understand the process and the process components, understand what to measure and how to measure, conform a team on a matrix level, not necessarily a hierarchical approach, but a functional approach. And make sure that you have a culture of communication, effective communication, and iteration in place. And also the keyword here, agile and iterate, doesn't necessarily mean you have to use always agile methodologies as a project management tool. And that's something we dive into the later presentations that come up with. So you can also perfectly use a waterfall strategy for your BPM projects, or a mixture of something that combines a Kanban execution of waterfall components, or put a waterfall project within Scrum sprints. That's all possible as long as you are structuring it right. So Agile means basically don't over structure, or don't be overly aggressive on using the simplest and easiest back office process, nor the biggest one, the most complex one. And remember that in the end, BPM has to do lots around, or has to do lots of with people, human interactions, human centric processes, and keeping to account the human interaction itself.
Oh yeah, and tools are here just to help, I guess. For example, if we illustrate that with Bonita, and that's something we are going to see in the next chapter and the next chapters as well, Bonita will help you iterate thanks to continuous integration, thanks to the fact that when you put a process in production, you can modify it and redesign part of the process, and then put a new version in production. You can collaborate through Git, you can use agile methodology, but it's only a tool. And really, we don't have to forget we are all humans, and that humans are the key actors. Even if we want to use automation, if we at BonitaSoft, we used a tool, we implemented a tool which is intelligent continuous improvement based on process mining. We always say that we don't replace human, we just augment human, and we help them. And I'm totally convinced about that. What would be your conclusion, Kai?
Yeah, I think if you look at BonitaSoft itself, there's so many things you can use out of the box that help with that. To begin with, BPMN standards, right? You can kind of create your flow charts and the process description, the process to be as is in a standardized fashion. So that's very important. Then things, more advanced things like the continuous deployment with Dockers and Docker integration, where you kind of can do the iteration without this being a nightmare each time. If you look at all the technologies, it is a struggle to stop production over weekend or overnight, do the deployment, test the deployment, go live, roll back. So those are things that BonitaSoft makes a difference natively. So yeah. And yes, you're right. We're all humans, and if you look at the technology, everything we mentioned is kind of secondary to the main struggles to organize a good team and to put a good communication within the team in place first. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I think we are done for now. Let's switch to questions.
Hi, I'm jumping in. I'm Laura from BonitaSoft, and I will just ask the question to you, Delphine, and UK. So the first question for you guys, it's about RPA. As regards RPA, what solution works best with BonitaSoft? Is it UiPath or Automation Anywhere, or do you use other solution?
Okay, I think I will answer this one. We have a technical partnership with the UiPath. So that's really easy to integrate Bonita with UiPath because UiPath has 2 connectors in its marketplace, and we also have 2 connectors on our side to communicate with the UiPath robots. And we use the callback API to make sure that the messages are going back through to UiPath. But you can still use other RPA tools. One of our Spanish partner integrated another tool with Bonita, and it worked perfectly well. So you use the APIs, and it will work. But
Exactly.
if you want to make it easy,
I second that. Yeah, I
mm-hmm.
agree with that. While UiPath is maybe more native, so it's a couple of clicks. All other RPAs we used before, and we tried out a couple of them, work perfectly fine with the BPM platform with BonitaSoft.
Thank you, guys. I have another question. What are the key components of BPM?
Well, maybe let's look at it from a technical perspective, and then see if we can complement that with the methodologies. So if you look at the system itself, there are several, and I hope I don't forget anything. But if you look at it from an abstract level, you have the process engine. Basically, that's one key component that allows you to draw and to automate the process sequence. So basically, say if something in step A happens, go to step B. If not, go to step C. So kind of lay out the flow chart. And that's usually a dedicated BPM engine that takes care of that. Another component for the system itself has everything to do with data and databases. So the process variables, things like who's going to do what, who's assigned to a specific process or task, how much time do you have, what happens with policies. So everything that makes this the process work in the end are variables that are stored in a database. And the second portion of the database is everything the process captures on a form level. So basically the name, last name, date, requested amount and whatnot, everything that passes through that also gets stored in the database. So database would be a second component. A third component would be everything related to forms. So BonitaSoft, for example, has a very strong form builder, which is a component dedicated to create with as little effort as possible interactive forms. So on the form level, for example, if you say, if you select a product A, enable form field B, if you select any other product, open another combo. So basically, it give life to the end user forms. That would be another component. And then you have something called the rules engine. So the rules engine is basically dedicated to defining what happens in terms of policies and automating policies. So if something occurs on the data level, on the flowchart level, how the process is going to react. So that's an additional portion. And the last one for most platforms is when you see Gartner and everybody else evaluating platforms, they sometimes call it IBPMS, the intelligent portion. And one part of the intelligent itself, or intelligence itself, refers to a dashboard, business intelligence, and reports. So a report component where you can create your widgets in order to show the pie charts and the workloads and the distribution in a graphical manner, but also can integrate other business intelligence platforms like Power BI, Tableau, and whatnot. So those are the base components of systems. In addition to that, methodology-wise, I would say BPM is about process automation, meaning looking at compliance, policy compliance, time compliance, and workload compliance. So those are the main objectives, so to say, on a methodology level or conceptual level that BPM has to accomplish. I hope that answers part of the question. If not, shoot a follow-up question and we go into detail.
Thank you, Kai. I think a question for you, Delphine. How Bonitasoft integrate with SAP?
Well, we use mainly two connectors called SAP GOC2 and GOC3 in order to make sure that you can perform a request in the SAP database. That's the main way people are integrating with SAP today. I don't know, Kai, if you have other ideas. I have not heard about API.
Yeah, there are native connectors you can use. So you can connect. But it also depends on what version of SAP or ERP you have. So it can be the on-premises one, SAP HANA. Then you have SAP Business, Business One, Cloud SAP. So basically, depending on what you have. If the native connectors are not sufficient, you can always use web services. So we had at least 5 or 6 projects where we ended up integrating to different ERPs, including SAP. And on many occasions, we ended up calling APIs or web service calls. REST APIs, web service definition language 2.0 to integrate to those systems. So it's all basic, pretty much standardized. So we didn't have any occurrence where we couldn't integrate to SAP specifically.
If I want to implement BPM at my organization, what should be the line of action from technical perspective?
Great question.
That's something, yeah, good question. That's something we are going to see deeper in the next webinars. But just to give you a kind of input, you have different phases. The first one would be a kind of discovery phase where you analyze, where you review the process, all the steps, where you define the points where you can add value, optimize things. Then you have the design step, but you can also start with the definition of your data model. So you don't really have an order here. You will work on those steps how you want. But you define the data model, you define your processes, your steps, how you want to optimize them, and then you will define the user interface. And the integration goes to make it work and orchestrate everything. And
right.
Then you define your architecture to make sure it works, because otherwise you can have surprises.
Right. Yeah, and architecture is key. So it all depends on the business model. There are things you have to take into account, like how important is the process in terms of availability. So if that is a 24/7 process, if you're going to host your process on the cloud. So basically, install everything on Azure or AWS, on a local server, on a server farm. And the answer to that usually has to do with the business case behind it. Pretty much everything is possible. We have implemented Bonitasoft, for example, on premises, local machines, virtual machines, very tiny implementations, which work perfectly for certain back office processes. And mission critical processes, like the case we published for Copper Airlines on the webpage. If you're interested into that, there we think about farms, server farms, clustered servers that account for redundancies, outages, high availability, and take that into account, because those are mission critical processes for international firms where you have to take that into account. But yes, there's a roadmap for that, and we will go through that. Next session.
Next chapter.
Thank you. That's the perfect transition for my next question. It's about this webinar series. What will be, how many webinars will there be, and what's the next one about?
Yeah, I plan to have 5 webinars. So the next one will be about the implementation process. So all the steps, best practices about that, what we just talked about. Then the 2 next webinars will be about, we are going to dive into collaboration between business and developers on Studio, for example, when to design, to work on the data model and so on, and then work on more on what is really important on the architecture point of view and web dev best practices, to make sure that you go deeper and deeper in the methodologies. And the last one, last but not least, and that's something people often forget, is what happens when you are in production. Because when you're in production, you have different things to do. First of all, the maintenance and improvement, continuous improvement of your process, and then what to do next. So we wanted also to address this. I would like, and I hope I can make that, to do a webinar every 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay. Okay. So I want to automate procure to pay cycle. Please guide. So if you have some advice.
Yeah. Procure to pay, they're templates, not necessarily pre-made templates, but we have done it a couple of times. And it can be something very simple or can be something very complex, depending on how detailed you want the process to automate the purchase to pay, procurement to pay cycle. There are things like usually the aggregation of what kind of purchases is it going to be? Is it going to be a minor purchase? Is it going to require a contract? And from there, create a couple of sub-processes. So if it is a major expense that you have to pay for on a contract level over a couple of years, for example, then you have to think about legal processes that support the procurement to pay process itself. So basically, you structure it first. You define what kind of purchase is going to occur, and automate the approval portion. So first, if you say you have typically 3 or 4 groups, contracts, major purchases, minor purchases, cash purchases. Depending on that, you initiate an approval process where you go in and say, based upon the policies, I pre-approve certain things within a threshold of X amount of dollars. So if you say Coille orders a piece of a pen and a block, a note block. So that's within certain things I don't need to ask permission for, and the pre-programmed policy pre-approves whenever I ask for that. Once that happens, and we conclude the approval process, then you invoke the delivery process itself, where you kind of make sure that the purchase department gets the instructions, the details, goes out with the pre-approved providers, quote with them, do the purchase, register the delivery, and delivers the goods to the internal people. So those are the process components, so to say. So it can be something very simple depending on what block you look at. Yeah. But yeah, we can go also offline if somebody wants to look at the other components, because there's enough material there for at least an hour to go through.
Maybe another webinar.
Yep.
So the last question, how can I connect my forms with database and shift from one form to another?
Well, the fact is that you have 3 layers. You have the layer of the process, which is the orchestration of this task. You have the layer of the data, which is mainly through the business management or through an external business database. And you have the interface layer. Those 3 layers, we want them to be separate to make sure that you can, well, you don't have dependencies, and it's, first of all, it's more performant, but also it's easier to implement, maintain, and so on. So this 3-layer architecture, you will go through something called contract to make sure that everything you want to synchronize will communicate. So if you build data, you will go through the contract to make sure your data are connected to your process and then to your forms. That is explained. If you want, if you give your email address, we can give you explanations about that offline as well, because you have chapters explaining the way it works. And if you want your data going through the form without passing through the process, you can also use REST API, for example. That's a way to
Exactly. and also extend that to external data. So you can populate the form through native databases, and there the advantage, if you look at Bonitasoft, everything is SOA based. So it's basically object driven. You can declare local variables, global variables. So everything you define within Bonita itself, you can if you define it like this, reutilize throughout other forms, throughout different processes. So you declare a bunch of variables only a single time, and kind of recycle that going through the different process types and processes. But also, as you mentioned, Delphine, leveraging external process data with web services, APIs, and so forth, where you can kind of call in from SAP, for example, data that comes from outside that also populates the form.
Thank you both. So I think we're finished for today. Great session, really great presentation, a lot of questions. I have some more that are just coming, so I think we will answer them offline. But really interesting. So I let you guys just conclude if you have one last thing to say, and otherwise we will just end the session and meet you hopefully for the next webinar of the series.
Any famous last words?
My famous last words. Thank you, Kai.
No, thanks. It was a great session, and look forward to talking hopefully to all of you very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this new webinar on process automation projects, methodologies, and especially we want to dedicate our webinar today about the building of a center of excellence. And today we are going to dive into something specific, which is the center of excellence. And I am very happy today again to be with you, Kai. I want to introduce Kai first, quickly. Kai is director at NSI Solutions in Panama and vice president of the services chapter at ABPMP. Hello, Kai.
Hi there. It's a pleasure to be here with you together again.
Yeah, again, and that's great because we are really going to dive into this center of excellence concept, and not only talking about theory, but we are going to share your own experience on that and talk about muy practical ways to implement it. So my first question for you, Kai, why do you create a center of excellence? What are really the reasons why you want to create it?
I'm not pretending that whatever I'm going to say is the only and the official and the unique applicable definition of a center of excellence in the context of BPM. But from what we have gathered and experienced in the past, it's basically something very simple. It's just a department or a group of people within a framework, a corporate framework, making sure that the processes are actually first of all end to end. So that's one of the most important criteria to define a business, including all the aspects of the value chain. So it's end to end, and that we have visibility as a second premise of what the center of excellence has to look for, so that we have insights of what happens within those processes and how the actors and components connect. So what kind of output from a given activity has on another activity, and as a sequence of events, hence the end-to-end concept. And then as an additional point, looking for optimizing the whole thing continuously. So that is on very basic terms, from a very high level perspective, what a center of excellence could be for processes and process management specifically. So making sure that we have those insights and enough insights to take decisions. Of course, there are a lot of ramifications in within, and part of what we try to explain also during this webinar. So on one side, you see the slides, and I'm trying to complement that also with our insights. So also on very basic terms, why we should do it is to make things better and make things better faster and cheaper. So the core of this cycle, and the keyword is cyclical management, is that we want to not only have a one-time shot, a one-time implementation of an automation, where we go in and say, well, you know what, I have a process, I put that into place, use the technology, robotics, BPM, and start automating, finish automating, leave it at this, and have a black box in production for a couple of months or a year, and nobody looks at it. So that's maybe the complete opposite of what BPM tries to achieve. BPM, in essence, make more like a methodology, wants to achieve in a continuous improvement. That's why you also see in the slide that Delphine shows here a circle. So it's supposed to be cyclical. It's supposed to be ongoing continuously. And that's the main differentiator between, if you look at an application, a simple workflow, and what BPM is. And with that in mind, you of course have the challenge of, if it's supposed to be adapted and improved upon continuously, so how are we going to achieve that? What that means, and that is basically what's intrinsical about a center of excellence, the ramifications therein. So if you want to make things better, faster, cheaper in terms of improvements and improving our process, then the center of excellence provides those insights, the feedbacks, and basically the alignments to different industry standards. So with that in mind, one of the major challenges of why we should do that in the first place is what we worldwide live currently through. The COVID-19 pandemic has an impact, bigger or smaller, most of the times bigger for everybody. But there's a silver lining, right? At least from the perspective of process automation. Many bureaucracies or things that are manual, the attachment to paper, those are all things that I do think as a result of what we do and live through is fading away, right? People need to get on the digital transformation train by obligation. There's no other alternative, and BPM can help. That also means we need to adapt our processes, digitize our processes, wherever we have like physical signatures, paper trails in the processes. All those things can be now optimized, automated to a certain extent. And there, I think BPM can help. And those are the kinds of challenges the Center of Excellence tries to address in optimizing the processes. So recognizing what is required in the market, away from brick and mortar towards digitized branches, towards automated processes, away from the physical paper trail over to a digitized blockchain maybe driven process behind the scenes, kind of making use of the technologies and incorporate that effectively into our iterative process enhancements. So with that, you see 4 blocks, right? We have the unifications or the linkage between the directions, operations. We have technology, of course, and business control. Technologies, we try to highlight in another or technology itself in another color that is an intrinsic or an inseparable part of the center of excellence always. So technology cannot be minimized away. It has to be a part of what we look at. We use technology, but of course we can also we cannot forget about the linkage to the business side of things, operation, and the overall vision of the company. So the upper management basically goes back to the old SWOT analysis, where you look at what are my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities in the market, the overarching strategy of the business, and kind of bring that back into my processes and translate that with technologies in order to address things I can do on the business side and on the operational side. So that is basically the umbrella of a center of excellence. Within, of course, we can make use of standards. So I spoke briefly about standards, and why the center of excellence is it's a perfect way to introduce those standards into our operations. So we have, for example, the CBOC, the Common Body of Knowledge of the Association of Business Process Management Professionals. It's called the ABPMP. So there's a framework we can make use of in terms of what kind of standards and measurements to put forth, how to describe a process as is, the new process to be, how to communicate those changes to our stakeholders. We can make use of the OMG, not the oh my god, but the Object Management Group kind of standards where we go in and leverage things like the BPMN 2.0, but also other things like the new decision model and notations, the DMN model, the Object Management Group has brought forth. So there are things there for the taking. They don't require an investment. It's just a matter of kind of applying those frameworks to our day-by-day operations, and that is where the Center of Excellence comes into play. Same goes with the APQC, the American Process Quality Center with their process classification framework, the PCF, which is a great choice to start categorizing processes, bringing them into order, standardize what we are doing, and not necessarily improvising and reinventing the wheel from scratch just because we start automating processes, or other things like the unified modeling language. So there are different key components the Center of Excellence can leverage in order to kind of link the circle you see with the business control, the vision, the general management, operations, and technology. So simplified, but basically that it's what it's about.
Yeah, of course, and that's kind of toolkit, and you mix everything. So what are the benefits for that? I mean, okay, that's great. We have lots of things to be implemented, but what are the benefits the company can see and the people can see as well?
Yeah, and it kind of bridges over from what I said before. So we want to make things cheaper, faster, better. And that doesn't go away. Also looking at the benefits. So overall, the activity or the methodology, the framework, process framework is an economic exercise, right? So what we want to do is we want to optimize the overall profits, right, and do that continuously. So and those are also the major benefits we that derive and are the result of a Center of Excellence. Specifically, more specifically, so what we want to look at is spot changes. So we want to make sure that first of all, when I mentioned, for example, the COVID crisis or things even before, when we looked at maybe enhancing our time to yes, our time to market time frame, and divergence if we maybe have one or two standard deviations between where we want to be and where we currently are. those are things we have to recognize and see where the market is heading at in terms of response times, quality, quantities, but also taking advantage of the long tail. So one of the things that's when we talk about automation often overlooked is one of the major, if you look at, for example, Amazon, or if you look at Netflix, one of the major attractive components through technology those companies brought to the table is enabling the long tail, the diversity of things in an effective manner, and be more attractive for people to choose their specific niches, their specific needs within those platforms. And BPM can do something very similar. So why we standardize?
That's what we can see here.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So why we standardize maybe the 80-20 rule, right? So the 20% of the processes that generate 80% of the volume, it allows us, it affords us with the freedom to recognize and to spot also those deltas, which doesn't necessarily fit into a complete automation. So automation is not necessarily sorted, and the center of excellence is not necessarily designed in a way that we get rid of human beings, right, or individuality, or things that are different, but kind of allow for the freedom in order to strategize around those things. And that's what I mean with spotting those opportunities in the market and adapt our processes to it. To get there, of course, we need a bunch of things. We need automation. We need what we are going to discuss later on, things like business intelligence, artificial intelligence, but they're all there. So the good news is with Bonitasoft, for example, and methodologies in BPM, they're already there, and just maybe a matter of organizing like a puzzle, the entire picture together and take advantage of that. And that's the job of the Center of Excellence, and one of the major benefits. Within that is what we see basically on the screen. So the typical benefits are we integrate different departments. We allow for better communication flow, eliminating silos, communication silos, data silos, do things faster. So if we have, and that's one of the things I mentioned before, the PCF, the Process Qualification Framework, in their suggested KPIs measure is how much time from the conception of an idea until you go to the market actually transpires, and if you are within acceptable or competitive benchmarks. So that is something we look also within the Center of Excellence. So we establish process KPIs, business KPIs, but also more importantly system KPIs. Often something easily overlooked when we speak about efficiency and effectiveness. Technology is an important part of the management when it comes to process portfolio management. We have to make sure that whatever architecture we come up with, we have a framework that supports us, so that we don't necessarily come up with very interactive processes and end user front ends and forms where, for example, if I type in a couple of queries in an elastic search fashion, it auto-populates the rest of the form fields. That doing so doesn't kill the speed and scalability of our applications. Specifically thinking that we extend the processes to a mobile market in a way that we want to be forthcoming, we want to be proactive, our forms should be very adaptive, but they have to be fast. So that is another KPI, systems KPI, we have to continuously measure. And that is one of the benefits of a Center of Excellence, to make sure that you have the peace of mind that somebody is looking at those sets of data, making sure that even while we are having maybe 500,000, a million of inquiries a day, our system holds up, scales, and our processes are still agile. So, yeah.
That's why if I jump into it, I can see that you are already talking about challenges, and that's, I think, something that is really important for a company. And here you were talking about different challenges, technological, efficiency, quality, and so on. If we talk on a pragmatic way, what is the challenge, the main challenge a company can expect with a Center of Excellence? I mean, Is
Yeah.
it a human challenge? It is linked to the technology? I don't know.
Yeah, it's multifold, right? So you have, as with everything else, you have a lot of challenges along the way, where you have to figure out what is the best way to approach this. So one of the challenges, uh, or one of the most effective ways to overcome most of the challenges, I would say, is sticking to proven and applied methodology. So when we spoke about defining KPIs, from the question before, the benefits, development methodology. So either it's if this is going to be agile, or if you're going to use a standard waterfall model for the implementation, having those ironed out and adapted to your company, right? Because different companies do have different standards, do have different ways of implementing technologies and solutions, but sticking to that and having a framework around those helps a lot, right? And that also goes down to the level of making sure that you have testing methods, using things like regression testing with Selenium, Gmeter, RPA, in order to make sure that your processes hold up, is part of a methodology framework you can use in order to minimize the challenges. So the challenges themselves, if you look at from the angle of what to do in practical terms to generate a center of excellence in the first place, you have to decide upon things like if you want to do and create a centralized or a decentralized center of excellence. So making sure that you have only one center that responds to all the process needs of a company, or if you create like sub-centers with their own challenges. So depending on that decision, you will have communication challenges, for instance. So if you go a decentralized route, for example, creating, if we see that often for banking implementation, if you have a bank where you implement and automate processes for customer allocation, right, or selling consumer loans, personal loans, mortgages, credit cards, and so forth, and stick to one center that focuses exclusively on the commercial aspects of those processes, you have to make sure that there's also another center that looks at the post sales, the post commercial efforts. What happens once it is your customer? How do you tend to the customer? Yeah, in collections, do you have collection challenges? So is there something that bleeds over as a deficiency from the first process to the back office processes, and make sure that there's a second center and that those both centers talk to each other? So communication challenge, depending on how you design your center of excellency, centralized or decentralized, is one of the major points. Yeah, from practical experiences, my suggestion would be always going with centralized centers of excellence. Yeah, you had the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about an example when you were talking about banking. There is a group in France called Crédit Agricole, which is working with Bonita in different regions and subsidiaries, and actually they really noticed that they have the same kind of processes and that they could homogenize everything and make sure they would be more efficient, optimize everything. And they are starting this, I think they are starting to have this kind of method, and they want to implement the center of excellence. But the fact is that they don't know if they have to centralize everything, but they know that they have to work on methodologies, on norms used to build the processes, to run them on the same tools, but not only that, the languages used by the developers to develop the interfaces, for example. And they see that also they have to sometimes work on their organization, their own organization, to make sure that everything is consistent to be able to reuse and be efficient among the group. And that's really interesting what you say, because for the time being, they have not decided yet, because they don't know if they have to centralize everything or leave freedom to every region to do what they want and just homogenize what is common. So
yeah,
that's an example.
Yeah, and that's a good example. So in real life, that happens. And I know it's easier said than done. If I say like go centralized all the way, if you have a very big and a very diversified organization, that may be a challenge in itself. So if you have to start, my only suggestion would be if you have to start in a decentralized fashion, make sure that there are communication channels and there's a structure in place that those different islands end up talking, and that there's a plan in place long term that they become centralized. Because in my mind, that's what we always argue about being the centralized decentralization. So while your organization is completely decentralized, goes through omnichannels or a blend of different channels, attending to the customer through the customer journey map and everything. You need to be flexible to operate perfectly decentralized and still comply with all the policies in place. And that second portion comes back that there's a centralized repository and hopefully even a center of excellence somewhere that makes sure to connect the dots and to enforce the overarching policies, right?
Mm.
Other challenges, there are
sorry.
Yeah, there's still a couple of very important other challenges. So that's maybe the base challenge of how you structure it. Below that, we have things, very basic things, lack of empowerment. Happens all too often where you end up creating some department or you announce and kind of designate somebody. You're going to be our process officer, but not necessarily allowing and affording this individual or this department to become independent in a way to suggest changes, enforce changes, and communicate that effectively. So with a lack of empowerment, it's also almost all of the times a mute point to start with from the get-go. So that's crucial to make sure that whatever hierarchy and whatever structure, command structure you have in place for your company, that it's on a level where decision can be taken, communication can be driven, and basically also changes can be enforced. Otherwise, it won't happen. Lack of funds, that's another very basic issue where we say, yeah, it's very important. We have somebody, Kai is going to be the process officer in charge, but we don't have any funds, internal fund allocation in order to do our job. For example, looking at the KPIs. All those things require technologies, licenses, training, communication, maybe a full-time job. So funding is crucial as well. Sounds like common sense. All too often it's omitted. Lack of mission critical processes, that happens also at the very beginning. So and there will be a couple of other questions we discuss later where we think about when would be an opportune time to start with a center of excellence. And one of the things that is also negative is if you start overly complicated, overly sudden or too soon, meaning that not having enough processes, enough data, and actually to enact upon something or to get statistical reasonable results where you end up having maybe 2 or 3 months of data. That's not necessarily something where you can say, well, there's a pattern or it's statistically significant enough in order to say, well, this aligns or maybe diverges from the overall strategy of the company. So timing is also very important, that we have enough critical mass in terms of information and processes in place where we can start. And the other one is lack of ownership and incorrect allocation. So if you put the center of excellence below some department, often there's a tendency to put that somewhere hidden away the IT department, right? There are a couple of process people taking care of our processes and process needs. So that is something to avoid as well. And lack of ownership where it's overly, it's like a matrix for everything. So it has to be a good combination between a matrix organization, but still a chain of command where actually you can end up deciding, because otherwise it's overly democratic and everybody has an opinion, and we ping-ponging our way forth without actually doing anything. So those are, from what I saw, the most important challenges to be aware.
Yeah, that's what we can see here, I guess. The kind of evolution in the organization structure of the Center of Excellence, where you have different kind of roles and people. I don't know if you want to comment that, or it's more or less the same kind of side here, showing this transversality, but also the need for executive level as well.
Yeah, on the previous slide, if you go back one, please.
Yeah.
Here the main point is not necessarily how to embed in your departments the center of excellence, but to differentiate between what we discussed at the very beginning, between process execution and project execution. So one of the challenges is understanding that the role of the center of excellence usually is not the implementation of new processes. So if you say, hey, we're going to purchase a new BPM platform, let's buy Bonitasoft. So we are going to use and implement Bonitasoft, for example. It's a project. I mean, you have a fund allocation, you have a specific mission, maybe you implement it with a process, maybe without a process. So it's a very limited in time, right? A limited thing to do. And usually you do need a direction, process-wise speaking. So like input of what we have to comply with KPI-wise. So if we implement the platform with initial process, what kind of as is to be KPIs we end up with. Things like the time for an approval before automation is 8 hours. We want to reduce that to 5 minutes because we're going to embed a business rules engine. Or right now everything has to be documented automatically so that all the screens, the process flow is going to be automatically documented and updated and kept up to date. So those are the things that the project carries. But there's a life after the project, and that is where the center of excellence goes and takes over. So mixing those two things is usually unhealthy, meaning that if you say, well, I have my process guys, let them have the ownership and let them be the executor of the projects. And that's actually not their role, right? Their role is to be the custodians and be vigilant about the KPIs, suggest and improve new improvements and enhancements, and not necessarily executing that. Therefore, you already have your PMO, your project department, and that's not going to change with a process department, right?
Okay.
And that's the idea of the slide, to differentiate between those two responsibilities.
PMO and Center of Excellence.
Exactly.
Okay, before we move on, because I think we already learned a lot of things, I would like to know if you are in the room, if you already implemented a Center of Excellence, because then we are going to talk about successes and difficulties as well. And so do you have an example of success, for example?
Before that, let me cover quickly stepping stones in order to set up a center of excellence. So we spoke a bit about the challenges, lack of funding, ownership, the non-existent differentiation between process and project, what you just showed in the last slide. So one of the, or a couple of stepping stones, major stepping stones for the creation is making sure, first of all, the handover occurs so that whenever there's a project that's concluded, it's being properly handed over to the Center of Excellence so that they can basically hold the ownership, communicate, follow up on pending items that in each project usually there are, then that we have a clear mission. So the boring Swot analysis I was speaking about at the very beginning, where we speak about, where are my strengths, weaknesses, and so forth. Making the effort of tangibilizing that or putting a number behind it so that there's a numeric value we can actually measure. So if we say that my strength is in maybe response times, what that actually means, and derive from there what is the goal we have to maintain. So if my competitive advantage is giving an answer to the customer during an onboarding process, to give an answer within 2 hours, working hours, Monday to Friday, and my threshold for process to be automated and we being vigilant about is that we are never exceeding 1.75, so 1 hour and 45 minutes, that this is something I measure. That is what I refer to, making sure that we are clear on the process level what the vision translates to when we put this vision into a process. So doing that job, or doing the work, the effort, in translating all of that into measurable brackets, and kind of put those brackets into the processes and measure those. So that's the second thing. Knowing where we head with a vision, form a liaison. So basically, we talked about IT, and not necessarily ending up that the department, the Center of Excellence itself, ends up as a sub-department somewhere in IT, in the basement, but also not going the other extreme and excluding IT altogether. So it's more mixed, right? It's so that we have at least one representative from the business side and operation side, and another representative from the technology side. Because BPM as a methodology is at least 50% technology. So, and that's also a sign of our times, right? So basically, if you look at any advancements in corporate innovations, competitive advantages, almost all of them have to do with technology. So we cannot eliminate the concept of technology by any means, away from the framework, away from the Center of Excellence. So why we don't want to this be ending up to be a sole department of IT, we do have to make sure IT is represented and it's part of the Center of Excellence. And empowerment, budget. Yeah, those are the stepping stones out of that. So examples, success and failure, yes, good question. And the most present I always have and am allowed to talk about is HSBC. So HSBC, we automated for several years in Panama and the region with different processes in corporate banking, consumer banking, retail banking. And there, basically before we ended up having something that approximates a Center of Excellence, was everything was improvised, and not necessarily in a conscious way. The way we implemented our process automations was basically that the return of investment, the business case, derived exclusively from the department in need. So we started automating credit card allocation. So there was a credit card department saying, hey, we want to automate our processes around credit cards, meaning integration with the credit bureaus, a rules engine where we can have a decision matrix of who's automatically approved or rejected, and all those things, right? Automated generations of the contracts, all of that, and integrate that to the core banking system and to the different credit bureaus. So we did that first with the island, quote unquote, of credit cards. Then, in semi-parallel, without having finished credit cards, a personal loan department approached us and saying, hey, we need to do the same. Let's start and automate our personal loans. So we created a different project team with a different budget and automated this. And we ended up with very effective processes on their own, but very ineffective as a company, because what ended up happening is that the ones who used those processes we automated were the customer and the officer, and they didn't separate between credit cards, personal loans, or anything. They saw the entire portfolio, and then ended up having a process and forms that look completely different for credit cards than they did for mortgages, for personal loans. So we created a new world for each business section. And that, of course, was not sustainable or effective. So what the bank ended up doing with us together is we created a very small team, a very small department. It was actually only 2 people, one liaison officer with enough empowerment to take decisions from IT, and one representative from the business side. And they together had the challenge or the mission of unifying forms, variables, reports, integrations, so very technical things, but also on the customer journey side of things, unify the CSS, the cascade style sheeting, the look and feel, the branding. So if we call customer name, customer ID, last name, in that order for one process, this is the structure to follow for all the other processes. And for each enhancement, for each improvement of a process, to create a business case, making sure that before doing anything to a process that is already in production, to give it a commercial structure, to say what is the return of investment, what is the business needs, and how actually the technology is going to solve that, and then incorporate the provider in order to automate things and develop things. And that worked very well. So it was not overly complex, and it was a night and day difference before and after we implemented it. So it was a good example.
Yeah, that's a great example. I have more or less the opposite example. You were talking about a provider. I've been working for a consulting company that were helping a famous ski resort, ski producer in Europe and especially in France. I can't name it, but I guess most of you will recognize it. They had lots of subsidiaries, okay? And they wanted to, of course, optimize everything and mutualize everything because they wanted to save money, to be more efficient, to make sure they would be, to get the time to market for all the product lines, because each subsidiary was working for one product line, more or less. And the fact that they asked a consulting company to help them implementing this kind of center of excellence. So they started with the first process and then with the second one, and then they wanted to make sure that all subsidiaries would use the same organization, same processes, because the production process was more or less the same with different product lines, but okay. The fact is that it had been sponsored by the IT team, okay? And nobody internally at the direction level, the top management level, was really convinced about that. And as in this company, each subsidiary had a very powerful top management. The fact that IT and a consulting company was pushing for that, and that nobody internally took it for its own project, it didn't work. It didn't work because we implemented everything. We trained the people, the users, and so on. But finally, after 6 months, they went back to their Excel sheets on one hand, the old ERP on the other hand, and it doesn't work. So what I learned from that is that you can do whatever you want as a consultant, as a provider. If nobody internally is already convinced and is a real sponsor, it won't work, because you have to make sure that this project will be internal and that then the center of excellence will be core for the company. That's something I guess we are going to see in the last questions. As we are a bit short on time, I suggest that we move on to the next question about the technologies and BPM technologies that can help the management of a CEO.
Very good, and also important point. So what you mentioned has a lot to do with company culture. Yeah, so corporate culture influences the success or failure of a center of excellence greatly. So if the culture is not there to support, to be receptive for something like an input, we can basically measure until we drop that and communicate and report. There has to be a structure that receives those suggestions, those measures, those reports, and actually is willing to do something about that. And you're right. That's usually a top-down challenge to make sure that upper management is convinced, and once upper management is convinced, it flows down. It never goes, from my experience, neither the other way around. So you can have a highly motivated team if the CXX and the management field is not convinced. It doesn't help. So in terms of technologies, given that we have the sponsorship, we have people that are convinced, and the culture is proactive towards something like a center of excellence, then we can make use of technologies like in Bonitasoft. There's a bunch of things we can use. Usually we have something like a BAM, a business administration monitoring. So very simple dashboards where we can look into the process side of things and look where we are with bottlenecks, workloads, response times, distribution. So if you have a logic of round robin allocation of workloads to see if that is balanced. And if we look and combine what I discussed at the very beginning, if we applied something like BPMN 2.0 and have a diagram that affords us with the granularity of assigning the workloads depending on the current workload, but also on the responsibilities of the process owners, saying that, for example, Coille can approve anything between Coille and Delphine can approve anything between $0 and $10,000, but only Delphine can approve something that goes over those $10,000, so $10,001 and more. Then this is something we can then start to measure in an intelligent manner with something like a BAM, a business administration monitoring within BPM. So that's the very first thing. From there forward, we have the standard reporting tools. Usually BPM doesn't provide a data cube, so you don't end up having a business intelligence or projections, pattern recognition natively as part of the BPM package. You usually should make sure that you have a tabular, organized accumulation of all the process data and business data so that later on you can throw some BI tools against that, something like Power BI, Tableau, or other tools, SAS. And then, of course, you can venture into the fields of data science with process mining. There are a lot of very interesting examples where you can, and Bonitasoft has modules for that, where you can explore the deltas, right? So you use a set of data of the process, but you follow the transaction even after the process in all the other systems and make sure, hey, are we actually aligned to our overarching end-to-end process I mentioned at the very beginning or not? That is something the Center of Excellence can use technology-wise. So data science, specifically process mining, but all the other fields of data mining as well, hunting for correlations, hunting for patterns, outliers, groups, clusters, and all those fun things.
And also, if that might look simpler, but you can use documentation as well. For example, if I take the example of Bonita, we have documentation generation, which will generate automatically the documentation of your processes with all the components, which is helpful as well in order to make sure that you can measure the efficiency of your process and make changes. And I guess that's what I saw in my previous, in my past as consultants. Documenting things is very important as well, because you need traceability in order to make sure from when you are to go to where you want, to share with people, to collaborate.
If you summarize, so what you want to avoid is, of course, only infrequently. So every once in a while you create a diagram, some documentation, or never. If you summarize both of those, usually you end up at around 50 or more %. And here it is about the same. So everybody who is actually keeping up with the process documentation and updating the updates to the processes on the documentation level as well, congratulations, because that is exactly what you have to do. And what Delphine mentioned is it's a foundation in order to go forward. Because if you don't know your own processes and keep them up to date, audit-wise, documentation-wise, then it's very hard to improve. Because what you mentioned before, like where you want to go, needs to establish where you currently are at. And if you don't have that, you're just guessing, right? And it's crucial to have that documentation. And it's an easy thing to do, right, with the right technology.
Okay, I can see that we are almost out of time, so I will jump to the last question because it's important. This question is really important, and then we are going to take other questions. Don't worry. So, Guy, what do you recommend finally? To implement the CEO internally or with the help of a service provider? Because one of you are functions is being director of a service provider as well.
Exactly, and there's the answer. So the best way to establish a center of excellence is hire NSI and Kai Winkler. No, just kidding. So the answer is, of course, if you can, the best way to do is to have the center of excellence internally, so that this is an internal department that you don't want to outsource, because the idea, there's a whole concept behind the process management. It's called enterprise process management, where you end up defining your entire value chain, as I mentioned, the end-to-end process, and also your company, what the company is doing, the reason of being in terms of processes. And if you do that, you don't want to outsource your core of your business, meaning the process management. So that's why it's best to keep that as a core integral part of your company internally. That doesn't mean that you cannot reach out to consultancy companies that can help you with establishing the center of excellence, to do audits every once in a while, maybe every quarter, to check if you're on track and up to date with the latest and greatest in terms of technologies and frameworks and methodologies. But you don't want to give away the control, because then what Delphine suffered in her example will happen. There's no ownership, and there's also no commitment. So internal.
Okay, thank you, Kai. I guess we are going to leave some time for questions, and I see that we already have questions here. Do you recommend to use a platform to allow all stakeholders to communicate and share experience and assets? For example, some RPA vendors propose one or there are other options which are brand agnostic.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it's a very good option, and the answer is yes. But, however, I wouldn't make that a prerequisite. So while it helps a lot, and it's far better than a file server, right? It shouldn't be your showstopper to start. So that's the first thing. You don't necessarily need specific software to start and establish the first couple of things. But if you have a knowledge management software where we can share lessons, documents, versioning, then by all means, that will help a lot. The other thing I want to mention is it doesn't have to be necessarily the most expensive option, right? Because those are very basic things, important things, and not to diminish the importance of an ERP. And depending on how the price is structured, it may be already covered by what you pay. But to pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars just for that wouldn't be my recommendation, right? As long as you have some kind of wiki approach with a file server behind the scenes, and even something as simple like SharePoint or an ECM, a basic ECM will help. But yes, definitely take advantage of technology for that, for the knowledge management. Good question.
Okay, yeah, very good question. Another good question, I think, because it's related to another concept. What role can case management play in a center of excellence approach to BPM? That's interesting as well, because it's a different approach.
Maybe. Okay, I would say that there's an evolution, right? A theory, not a theory of evolution, but there's a theory of evolution in BPM, right? Where industry experts and companies like Gartner, Forrester, they established something like you have an application, you have workflow, you have BPM, and then you have ACM. And ACM being adaptive case management, right? Where the idea behind the scenes was that while you have rigid structured processes, there's a component for the cases that don't necessarily have a predefined answer, where you can kind of interact ad hoc while still tracking what you did, and from there establish rigid processes in the future. So if that is the case, with that in mind, I would say that it's not necessarily something different from what we just spoke about. It's just a different flavor. And why do I say that? Because besides ACM, you may end up incorporating in your center of excellence other things. You will have, and I say that because in most of the companies I currently implement services and technologies, most of them have by far more than one tool to automate things. So you will see things like workflow, BPM, ACM, and also RPA. I mean, RPA is the hype. Yeah, and we've done it too, right? So you have robotics. So what I would suggest is make that part of your center of excellence, but it won't make it necessarily different. In case of case management, what will be different is that you will have to worry, not worry, but put more focus on where the case went to than in BPM, because in BPM it's prescribed. You already know where the case should go and who's going to do what. There the focus is more on distribution, like to see if the workload creates bottlenecks, things like that, or if the goal was to answer in 2 hours, but there's an outlier of somebody answering in 1 hour, so a good outlier or a negative outlier, to catch that. In ACM, in addition to all of that, you have to see, hey, there are cases, but those cases start to be repetitive. Can I take that away from ACM and put that into something more rigid in BPM, or are those cases justified as case management, right? So that is maybe a different flavor as part of the Center of Excellence, but I wouldn't make it something different. It's like something as part of RPA besides RPA, BPM workflow and so forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and sometimes that's good to have both approach in the same process, because you can't anticipate and everything. So it's good also to let freedom and making sure everything can happen. And then, as you said, after that you monitor everything and you can see what can be taken out of case management and be back in RPA or BPM, or remain unpredictable.
Yep.
Another question, Miguel is asking if one of the Center of Excellence benefits can be resilience.
Okay, maybe. Okay, yes. So if I think right about the question, it can be. So because one of the things the CBOK, for example, the Common Body of Knowledge of the APPMP, when they describe the Center of Excellence, one of the things they want to prepare the organization for is changes. So, and I took that concept and kind of compared that with traffic jams. So, for example, if you look at, there's some sort of a ripple effect. For example, if you have a traffic, right, where you don't have necessarily an obvious reason why you would have a traffic jam, but still you have a traffic jam, a gridlock. So nothing moves, but there wasn't an accident, a car damage on the street, nothing that could explain the traffic jam. So, and if scientists look at those systems, it usually turns out that if somebody brakes too harshly because of whatever situation, the ripple effect it has behind your car in the line gets exponentiated, and it kind of translates into a traffic jam. And the same happens in corporations when it comes to changes in processes. So if you have like changes in processes that are not rightly managed, it produces that ripple effect. So if you say, hey, we need to change a parameter in the process, the way we calculate, a new form, a new document, if you do that, but if you do that without a center of excellence all the time, then you create that kind of traffic jam, because the operation is not prepared for all those changes. So yes, having a center of excellence, the corporation can become more resilient to change. If that was the question, the answer would be yes. If you focus the question on change management and how to prepare and how to prime to actually take advantage of changes the corporation to do that and to do that the right way. And a very technical example would be if you ask what specifically would be in Bonitasoft, there's a concept called continuous delivery. And it's only a small piece, but an important piece. So for example, if there's a change and you want to go live with that change in production, you don't have to stop production. You just put the change, and seamlessly, without stopping your day-by-day activities, the change goes into production and is there for the next one who goes onto the new process. So those are the things where I think resilience can be achieved through the right change management as part of the things a Center of Excellence has to take care of, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The last question is from Miguel as well. Typically, BPM focuses on operational excellence, improving what the organization does. Does the Center of Excellence, can the Center of Excellence help the organization to innovate? And in what way?
Yeah, definitely. The most obvious ways to innovate or to improve are on the processes, right? And maybe an example. One of our customers right now looks at their processes and discovered that we still have too much of a paper trail as part of the process. In order, okay, the goal is right now COVID-19 setting the scene, survival, but also to progress, right? To get new customers. In order to do that, the company needs to find a way of getting to the customers without the customer necessarily going to, in this case, to the bank or to the branch, to the physical branch, and still sell the products. So, and that is a field where process engineering and enhancements, inventing new things, can come into place as part of the Center of Excellence. So specifically what this customer did is identify, why do I require the customer to come to the bank? And it turned out to be silly, right? So there was a reason where the customer had to give their consent in order to be checked in the credit bureau, to sign the contracts in order to be allowed to receive the funds. So basically, paper trail. And then basically the Center of Excellence, the process experts in that company looked at the legal framework in the different countries where this process is, and see if there's actually a law prohibiting to substitute the signature by OmniChannel tokens. So one token, biometrics, on a cell phone, meaning we extend the process to the cell phone, where you can take the picture, take the fingerprints and whatnot, in order to identify through this channel, showing this method, the process participant, and make sure that once you put your finger there, then it's a valid signature of, we can go to the credit bureaus, we can sign the documents, and if you go through the web page, creating a unique hash, a one-time password, where you then sign your documents. So we identify a way to substitute the physical signature aligned to the local law per channel as part of this process. And that was a specific innovation, maybe not groundbreaking, but effective, the Center of Excellence did. So short answer, yes. The long answer was what I just mentioned.
Thank you very much, Kai. Okay, thank you very much to you all. I think we are done for today. We are going to conclude this this webinar. We want to thank you for your attention, even if we went out of time. I hope you enjoyed it. And I really want to thank you warmly, Kai, for this new webinar, because it was very interesting. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, all.
Bye.
Welcome everybody to this webinar dedicated to the role of data in business processes. Let me introduce myself. I'm Delphine Coille. I've been working for Bonitasoft for the last 6 years. I'm Evangelist and Community Manager. And today I have the pleasure to be with Coille Winkler, Director at NSI Solutions, VP of Chapter Services at Bpm, and a huge influencer in process management based on BPM. Today we will present the applied practices and also the Bonitasoft technologies for data mining in the BPM field through a practical example of process mining in action. Just before we start, we are going to try to do it as much interactive as possible. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the panel you have in your configuration go to webinar configuration, and we will try to answer. If we cannot answer while we are presenting, then we will answer at the end of the session. Okay, now I will let Kai start and tell you about data, what they are, why we need them, and what are their role in BPM. Hi, Kai. Thank you for being here with me.
Thanks, Delphine. And thanks everybody else for joining today's session. Yeah, so as Delphine mentioned, what we've prepared today basically is twofold. So on one hand, what we want to introduce you with is a small part of theory of data, its importance in BPM and business process management in general, and from there go forward and see how that unfolds in practical terms. So basically how to make use of data, take advantage of it, and specifically in BPM, how to become more competitive, making the best of what we currently have in terms of data, and how to improve upon that. So yeah, making sure that we can leverage the wealth of information our business processes and platforms such as Bonitasoft generate. To begin with, I think it's no surprise for anyone on this call, specifically those of us who are BPM professionals, BPM experts, and also starters, that there's been a very important shift in general, and in technology in particular over the last couple of, I would say, like 2 or 3 years, where we see things like micro automations, distributed services, microservices, stuff like RPA, robotics, AI, machine learning, and all that fun stuff. Where basically, under the umbrella of digital transformation, there are a lot of advances in technology where we can make more out of our implementations and processes. Specifically in when it comes under the umbrella and the coin, right, digital transformation, when it comes to that, I would argue that on one hand, BPM is a key, and within BPM, data is the other key. So combining data and BPM, I would say that the door to digital transformation is basically open. So it's an exciting time to be in and work on BPM and make use of data. In my experience, things like digital transformation per se, it does require an important maturity or level of experiences in terms of process governance, so that we can make sure that we, on one hand, have processes in place, started automate, but also collect data, right? And the good news is that while we are doing that, we can easily leverage Bpm Learning Curves. So Bpm is an enabler from our experiences, having implemented over at NSI, as Delphine mentioned before, implementing in the region Bonitasoft, for example, that combining Bpm and digital transformations, people do have a lot of success. By now, most of the companies, and I'm sure also most of the participants in today's calls, have managed to establish an important learning curve. Also, having implemented mission critical processes, our customers, for example, implemented at least 50 to 60% by now of their mission critical processes in BPM, and are ready to take the next step. And in that sense, the next step would be data science. So the evolutionary step from here forward, BPM, where to go next, is leveraging the BPM implementations with data science. And how to do that in practical terms, we will see in the second portion, as promised in the presentation. So also as a side note, today's webinar is based upon an article I recently published with Bonitasoft, where we basically outlined in greater detail what we summarized today, the role of data, and a couple of things in analytics, how to use data in Bonitasoft specifically and BPM in general, and also having that being an input of an upcoming book in intelligence with BPM that is being published by Future Strategy. So for whoever wants to read on or delve a bit deeper into those topics, we can share the link at the end of the presentation. As you will see in the Delphine, the next slide. in the keyword being of what we tackle today is basically data. So in order to get there, to take the next evolutionary step in BPM, as mentioned before, that being data science in BPM, we first of all have to accomplish the 4 basic steps, right? First, make sure that we have access and we collect data. The good news is, as you most likely saw through your implementations, covering and implementing BPM processes with platforms like BonitaSoft, those processes are natural data collectors. So by default, you start collecting information about your processes regarding time, bottlenecks, workloads, and so forth without having to spend a second thought on that. So there's a lot of ground gain by simply implementing and covering most of your most important processes, mission critical processes with BPM. On the other hand, we do have to gain an understanding, and a couple of companies are still struggling with that. Understanding the data, make use of the data, and there maybe one of the first steps one can take is kind of make sure to visualize information to represent that in a graphical manner. That then makes it easier, also from a process management perspective, to make sense of the data repositories and the information we currently have. And then there forward, as a third point, react based upon the data. So now that we understand, have the data, what can we do about that? And there, it's like a funnel. Even fewer companies have a lot of success nowadays and can follow practical guidelines. We also lay out in the article we published in the BonitaSoft webpage how to use that data in order to take decisions, better decisions, and feed those decisions back into the processes. And with that, reach the fourth step, where we kind of automate the loop of conclusions based upon the data back into the processes, so that the processes help us to anticipate by the means of our data. So where we can then make use of AI and machine learning, neural networks. We have seen a couple of very interesting examples that are perfectly possible with BonitaSoft, for example, of convoluted neural networks and things like where we can start combining advanced recognition of visual inputs, advanced recognitions of patterns within our data sets, and feed that back into our process and have the processes react on that. And a couple of examples we will see live very shortly. So with that, basically what you see here, what we already use and can take advantage of very easily for that is reports, dashboards, things like BAM, the business activity monitoring indicators, and BI. And from there, Delphine, also, and I know it's a very boring slide, but important nonetheless, making sure that while we are going towards digital transformation, trying to reinvent ourselves and use data for that and automate as much as we can to not lose touch with not reality, but basically touch with the company strategy. So always make sure that we are kind of aligned with basically the strategy of the companies in quantifiable terms. And here the keyword is again connecting our main topic data with our processes, make things quantifiable. Here my suggestion would be, in order to define vision statements, mission statements, and value statements, let's try always to translate all those usually bland things into something more tangible, something more quantifiable, and with that feed them into a cycle of measurable goals, right? Financial goals, marketing goals, and have those become KPIs in our processes. The train of thought here, what I suggest always to develop as a roadmap in order to get there is first define variables. With those variables, craft KPIs and keep it simple crafting KPIs. We had a couple of customers that started automating their processes with KPIs and ended up with several hundreds of them, which is a bit too complex to manage effectively on a day-to-day basis. So effective KPIs, indicative KPIs, and consolidate those into a unified dashboard, a BAM dashboard. And from there, apply things like BI and analytics. And analytics, the 3 or 4 analytic steps you already are most likely familiar with, like predictive analytics, descriptive analytics, and those things that help us basically to identify, is there a pattern? Can I make use of this pattern? And can I tell the process, hey, I identified a specific road, a specific outlay layout of your data in order to use that information in order to take a decision or adapt a specific path in the process. And here, the second point would be also not necessary to limit ourselves in our own data packages we generate from our processes or integrations to other applications, but also reach out and integrate to things like big data. Big data is very important here, and I think we are at a point where it's also easy enough to incorporate. So basically, examples here it would be to make sure that we identify things that correlate. So very good examples we see in the industry. One of those, and very well documented, by the way, is UPS, that while automating their fleet management, incorporated aspects of IoT, Internet of Things, and also big data by implementing sensors, vibration sensors on the chassis of their vehicles, where instead of going through many cycles of preventive maintenance, what they do is kind of establish a database of vibration patterns of their vehicles, and then establish tolerance thresholds where when there's a vehicle exceeding those thresholds, then and only then it gets into preventive maintenance and repair mode. And it has been proven far more effective and price effective as well than doing it completely manual. And which is a perfect example of big data being the big differentiator in big data. Focusing more on things that correlate than necessarily going at once after things in order to explain why that happens. And for example, in UPS, when there's a vehicle exceeding the vibration threshold, we don't necessarily why the car is breaking down, why that happens, but we know soon enough that we have to do something about it in order to save time and money. And that is a very good example. That doesn't exclude the classical analytics you see usually out, where you have a data population, you pull data samples, and from there try to explain why something happens. That still occurs, but you also go into big data sources, things like World Bank, for example. World Bank has awesome data sources available to everybody, and look for GDP in order to identify economical cycles and see how those predict possible sales numbers, and adapt your process from there to see, hey, we are going to have an uptick in the GDP. Hence, from my historical data, I can forecast that there will be a tendency for more sales volumes. In that sense, I can automatically assign more sales personnel to a commercial process. So that's perfectly possible. And we can also tail into new services. I don't know if you guys saw that a couple of weeks back, I think 2 or 3 weeks back, Google launched their new services as I think it's an extension of Google Scholar, where you have Google data sets or Google dataset search, where you can also have access to worldwide databases through a unified search interface. So big data, big news, and I think also a big differentiator in automating our processes using data. In the next slide, Delphine. What you see here is one of those aspects, what we mentioned before, specifically machine learning. And we show that slide just for you to get an example, because that's something we already do very frequently in our processes, is leveraging certain methods. In this example, we are using, that's an example of an insurance company that asks the question, what are the predictors in my historical database of a customer being a customer that is ending up producing a claim? based upon variables I currently handle, I currently capture through my processes. Things like gender, age, the type of car I drive, and if a person smokes or doesn't smoke, and try to identify a certain pattern there and feed that back into the processes. So we do that also for risk management models through loan origination, and in this case for policy commercialization, so sales of car insurances, where here, for example, in this graphic, you can see that there are a couple of nodes in a decision tree model where we can identify that, for example, in this database, most of the females don't seem to have any impact, don't produce claims. So if that is the case, and we know that from our historical data, we can create a dynamic variable that feeds back into the process saying, hey, if you already know that this requester is part of a gender that doesn't produce a claim, then we don't necessarily have to ask too many other things in a dynamic form and proceed directly with a pre-approval process. Whereas, for example, if it is turning out to be a male requester driving an Alfa Romeo, where you see one of the worst nodes of producing a claim, then eventually we can adapt the quotes, the policies, and or exclude this requester altogether. So those are examples where you can make use of data models, in this case, naive bias and a decision tree model, in order to feed that back into the process. Just to give you a plastic example of how that would look like in real life. Next slide. So to consolidate, what we try to achieve is basically having processes that on one end produce data. Here you see different data sets. For example, a process produces in terms of BPM, native BPM data, a BPM data repository, where I store things I mentioned briefly before, timestamps, bottlenecks, responsibles, who did what, and what kind of activities we did in the forms, and store that in the data repository, complement that with business data. So basically things like if we go back to the selling insurances, for example, where you come from, demographic information, your earnings, income, your expenses, and so forth. Those are information we can complement our process information with, and also enhance that with external repositories. So that can be a credit bureau, for example, and also big data. The missing piece you won't see here in this graphic, because that is what Delphine is going to show you shortly, is basically the engine that then goes into those databases, data repositories or marts, pulls out what we need and produces the analytics in order to feed that back into the process you see on top. And that is the portion we're going to show you in the second part of the presentation. So the idea here with those couple of slides was basically to give you an introduction of what kind of usage we make of the data. And now with a practical component with Delphine, you will see how that looks like specifically in BonitaSoft.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kai. As you said, we are going to go to a practical example and to show how we can combine data mining and BPM to bring values in a day-to-day activity for a company, as long as you are able to use it properly and to make the right actions afterwards. So what we decided to do at BonitaSoft 1 year ago is to try to find a way to use data mining, use the powerful of our engine and of our BPM platform, and use intelligence to make sure that we could help our users reaching goals and improving, being in a continuous improvement loop. So what we did, we defined a goal, a method, we built a tool, and we used a lot of data. So our solution for what we call intelligent continuous improvement, which means really making sure that in an operational environment, you can have a business process improvement. The goal we chose was to avoid delays. Why? Because if you have delays in your company, it has a big impact. Delays are very important in most of the cases. And that's, if you avoid them, you will save money, you will have satisfied customers, you might also sometimes avoid issues. So it's a common goal, and it has a real impact on your day-to-day basis and on your achievements. The method we chose was an artificial intelligence algorithm based on process performance mining. I won't go into too much details here because it is quite technical, but the fact is that this algorithm is based on operational process mining, which is collecting data and doing an intelligent algorithm to predict what could attend by looking at each step of the process and doing a comparison between the archived cases and what happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future. We built a tool based on that called Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement and based on Elasticsearch. Why? Because Elasticsearch, is a NoSQL database, which is a kind of big data database because you have crude data, and it is the kind of database that is the most the most suitable when you use this kind of process performance mining algorithm. Also, in this kind of cases, you need a lot of data, because without data, you won't have an efficient and precise algorithm. So we first started with process data, because in Bonita, you already have all those data. You have all the tasks, you have the path taken by your cases, you have the assignee, you have the duration of each task, you have the number of tasks, you can see the number of cases, you can see also errors when you have a very long time. So you have a lot of data that can help you taking decision and avoid delays. But also business data. Why? Because even if you use standard data through the process, what is also very interesting is to combine them and cross them with business data, which will be specific to the customer environment, to the business of the company, and which will give even more information to make sure you will make the right actions and improve your process. So that's how we have built BC. Here with Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement, we are going to focus on two specific profiles, which are the developer. We call him Dave. So the Bonita developer, the one developing the processes for the company, and the operation manager, the one that is operationally managing the process. So the one which is, for example, assigning the tasks to the team, the one monitoring the business, monitoring the actions. So how it works. You can see here the Bonita platform. I don't know if everybody knows it, but you have the engine, and it is connected to applications that are viewed to users. And here's the database, the Bonita database. It can be any kind of database, MySQL, SQL Server, but here you have all the information about the processes. What we are going to do, we are going to plug Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement to Bonita database directly in production, and extract the data through data polling on an incremental way to make sure that you have an update every time and you extract data like if it was on real time. Then we store it in the Elasticsearch database to make sure that the prediction model can reuse it, do the analysis, and give predictions. Then we use those predictions to show them in the monitoring interface, but also to help the developer making configurations. I will show you everything in the demo in a few minutes. We can see that we have lots of domains of applications. Kai already gave you very interesting examples of how data and also data combined with BPM, with intelligence, can be used to improve the actions, to improve the way to work. Here you can see examples of processes such as, for example, the multimodal travel, where you have to travel by bus, by fly, have a flight, also book a taxi. And if your train, for example, or your bus is late, you might miss your flight, and then everything will not be okay. Also, for complex projects, we can see that making sure that the first step of your project won't be late is very important. If you have a building project where you, for example, you have to build the foundations and they are late, you could lose a lot of money, millions of euros or dollars, and having the way to predict that is really valuable. So now I am going to show you how it works with Bonitasoft and Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement. Just before we start, I chose an example which I think is very common for everybody and which is used by most of our customers, is the loan management in banking area. Why? Because when you ask for loan, you have several steps of validation, and you might have bottlenecks, and we want to avoid that in order to make sure that you will receive your loan in the right timing. Okay, so I hope you still see my screen. I'm going to the Bonita interface now. I'm logged as an administrator because I want to show you the process first. Here, if I go to the diagram, let's imagine that the IT team designed the diagram for the loan operations team, and as you can see, you have a process with lots of steps. I hope you can see that, and with different decisions depending on, for example, the amount of the loan request, depending on the acceptations, the validation or not of the manager, and so on. So you have different steps, but here, if you use Bonita administration platform, the only way to see if there is an issue is if a task is failing, which is technical. But you have no way here to know that something might be late or is already late. That's why we designed Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement for the teams. So we did it using two ways. First of all, we give the ability to the IT team to enhance and enhance the interface of the operator to make sure that they can have predictions in their dashboard. So if I go to the loan dashboard, here you see that, for example, I am an operator. I have a list of loan requests. They are at a certain step, but I don't know, really, I don't know which one might be late, which one is already late, and then I will take them the second after the first. If we use the REST APIs provided by BC, we will help the operator because we add and we give the ability, for example, to the IT team to add a new column, which will give information about the case and which will help setting priorities. If we can see that this one is already late, and here we can see, for example, that this one is urgent because it remains 1% of chance to be on time, which is almost late. Here we can see that we still have time, so it might help me choosing which one I will take first. But more than that, and to make sure that the operation manager could help his team and take the right decision, such as, for example, assigning a case to someone else if we see that there is a bottleneck somewhere, to make sure that, for example, if there is workload because it's vacation time, maybe add a step or put something on hold. We added in Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement 2 applications, and they are delivered, with the module. This is the first tab is the monitoring interface. This one will help the operation manager to monitor all the cases and make sure he can help his team during the right task. As you can see here, we can see the on time, but also the predicted late and late tasks with the percentage of chance to reach the target, because our goal is always the SLA and the delays, to avoid delays. Those ones are already late. We know that they are late since 6 days. And those ones, interesting, are the ones that might be late. Well, those ones in 1 hour, I think they will be late. But if I take this one, for example, we still have 3% of chance to be on time. I see that I am still at the first step of the process. I started today. I did the first task today, but I just have 1 day and 22 hours to finish it. And to be honest, if I am just completing the loan application, I'm a bit late. So maybe the operation manager will take actions directly in BonitaSoft, because here you are in BC. Here in this tab, you jumped to BonitaSoft, and then you can take actions. You are at the overview of BonitaSoft. Also, I will need to monitor. We were talking about data, and at the beginning, Kai was presenting all the ways to analyze data. We talk about KPIs, about BI, and at BonitaSoft, we know that you also need that. You need to make sure that you can analyze the past data, and you need to predict what can happen to make sure you will improve your processes on a long term. So we gave 2 informations here. The first tab is about case indicators, to know which are the cases that are late or on time every month for a certain period of time. And for here we just have 1 application, but for all your processes. You see the number of cases, and you see the median, for example, which is what we measure when we use our algorithm. You can see that if you look at the distribution of case duration, well, here it's not really representative, but we will have 90% of cases that ends in 3 days. We also have indications on tasks, which is important as well. Why? Because if we have a process like this one, let me go back to this process, has different paths. As you can see here, I can go here, or at this step, I can come back, I can have a validation, we have a notification. So you have different steps. If you come back here, you can see each task, the number of times they have been done, if they were present in the case, and the loop ratio, and the percentage of occurrence. For example, here you can see that the credit history has been cleared 50% of the time. So here you can take actions and say, okay, do I really need this task? and improve with your developer on the long term what you are doing and how you are going to implement your support. So you are in a continuous improvement loop.
And that is a very good example also of process mining. So yeah, making sure that you validate also real life against what you designed the process to do, because we observe that going forward, most of the times, if there's something that doesn't necessarily add value, like the 50% Delphine just showed, people just skip that. And if you identify that early enough, you can perfectly adopt and optimize your process against that. Yeah, good example.
Yeah, thank you, Coille. And exactly, that's what I wanted to explain. We really need to make sure that we can prove well and control the theory with what's happening, what's really happening. Why? And that's what I am telling you just after this slide. But I will start with the value of Bonita continuous intelligent improvement. Really, this kind of tool will be useful in contexts where you have very long processes, because you can't anticipate easily, because you have lots of steps, because you have quality indicators, but sometimes you won't have the way to improve. Then it's useful as well because you are not going to replace your employee. You are only going to augment it. What we say augment, you help him and you help his decision making with data that will be only accessible by algorithm. You are not replacing his decision, and that's really important. You keep the human decision, and he keeps the choice, the liberty to say, okay, I will do it, or I'm not going to do it. As Kai say, we give the information. You know that this task is only chosen 50% of the time. Why? Okay, we analyze it. We see that maybe it would be better to remove it. But that's your decision at the end. If you don't want to, you will not remove it. Then, something important as well. We see that working on data mining, process mining, require specific skills that are called data science skills, and those kind of profiles, are very rare, so they cost a lot. Thanks to this kind of tools, we allow companies to add these kind of competencies, resources inside without having a specific profile, which could be very difficult to find and to pay. More than that, we remain in a very operational way, because we decided to build a tool that would be easily added in an existing production environment. You plug BC to your existing Bonita platform, which makes it easy to get the information and to be able to give predictions only a couple of hours after the deployment. And also, you make sure that you work immediately on your production environment. Why? Because you won't need something like BC when you start your project. You need it when you are already in production for example, I don't know, 1 year or 2 years, and you see that you still need to improve. So today, and that's what I wanted to say, we are still working on improvements. Our research continues all the time. And that's also why we still work with lots of customers, and we need to work with customers because we need real data. We don't want to work on theoretical data. So just here, I do a quick parenthesis. If customers are in the meeting and you want to collaborate with us on this research, on this innovation, tell us, because we need data. We need a lot of data. So with Bonita 1.2, we added the task execution, as you said, as you saw, sorry. But we also want to make sure, for example, that we will help taking decisions quickly by adding heat maps, including as well business data to our algorithm to make sure that we have a better accuracy. And we are currently working again on the algorithm to make it as accurate as possible. So it's an ongoing story, and we will keep you posted as soon as we have news on BC. So I think we are both done with our presentation. I see that we already have questions. Thank you very much, everybody. So someone asking if we think that it can be applied to the public administration and public administration procedures as well. Maybe you want to answer, Guy?
Yeah, and also you feel free to add. So if I understand the question correctly, it's not necessarily process specific. So wherever you're able to put a metric behind a KPI, yeah, it's a potential candidate for analytics and continuous improvements and using everything we just saw. So that can be a process like ID renewals, registries. So basically, a public administration process would perfectly fit as well as a private company. So there aren't any limitations there. So as long as you can establish data and historical data around, you can basically apply that perfectly.
Is it possible to integrate BonitaSoft with an ERP system to monitor processes and transactions of the business processes in the ERP system? Yes, it is. As long as the ERP system has opens these APIs, and we can, for example, or we can connect through connectors, database connectors, for example, or if we can connect to through REST APIs, we can integrate with ERP systems. For example, Bonita is integrated with SAP. We also have specific SAP connectors for that. If you want to monitor the processes, maybe I'm not sure I understood correctly what you want to do here.
Yeah, most likely, but most likely there are processes already in the ERP. So, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. From a strategic perspective, I would suggest that I wouldn't necessarily try to substitute and replace processes you have running in ERP with a BPM, but you certainly can extend the BPM in order to listen for data that comes from those processes. And whenever they feed into a BPM process, even better, so you add value. But the answer is yes. And also, in addition to that, because we had a couple of examples to that, and Delphine can speak in more detail to the exact examples, is there are also a couple of implementations where there's the ERP, and the ERP is kind of a black box, and not necessarily because it's impossible to integrate. It's just maybe an old system, or it's so expensive to do, or to find research to do that in a timely fashion, that it may be also feasible to look at the RPA extensions that Bonita brings with. So that is a possibility as well, to extend robotics and use the robotics in order to get into the ERP, get the data, and listen for the patterns. But definitely, yes. It's just a matter of drafting it out, making sure that you don't replicate things you already have in order to not have necessary redundancy. But you can perfectly integrate also business intelligence from the BPM into the ERP.
Okay, we had a question as well. Please explain what a time box process is. A process where you have to reach steps in a certain time. For example, this kind of processes I showed you, from my experience, and for example, one of our customers is working with it like that. They had an SLA to to do the whole process in 4 days, which means that you have to perform tasks within a certain time. And some tasks can be done very quickly, but sometimes if they are not done, for example, in a half a day, you can imagine that you will have an escalation process in your process, and you can define that. You can think about it and say, okay, we need to do this task in 2 days. Then you go to next steps. If it's not done in 2 days, escalation process to another team or a manager, or I don't know what.
And the question is actually very good in the sense that if people look at the data and analytics, a couple of things we established at the beginning of the presentation. The possibilities, of course, are endless, but usually time and the measurement of time is a perfect way to start, and the best, and also the more integral an intuitive way to start. So if you measure time in the process, it's always a good bet to begin with that. And response times and so forth, it's a no-brainer. You have that information there and you can measure against it, as Delphine mentioned. The advantage would be, and you can do that even without any analytics, right? You just do it as you always did. You say you want the stuff done by maximum 1 or 2 days, and if that doesn't happen, send out an alert. So that's very basic, and you can do that perfectly with Bonitasoft as is right now. The advantages you can gain bringing into analytics into the whole thing is the example that Delphine showed, that while you still have your ongoing goal of complying with something specific within 2 days, you can then look at the probabilities and say, well, given my historical data over the last 2 or 3, 4 years, your current case you're looking at has only 40% of making it, and then act on that, because that's far more precise in order to accomplish the result than doing it the old-fashioned way. Kind of analogic to the example of UPS that looks at the vibration patterns instead of going to the preventive maintenance all the time. So it's more precise.
Next question. Do you have a plan to allow an ERP vendor access to BC to work on defining the data links? It depends on what you call an ERP vendor. To be honest, for the time being, I don't know. I can't answer your question. I think I will ask the question and I'll come back to you because as of today, I don't see any plan for the time being. BC is only plugged with Bonita, and you can use Kibana to show your analysis and your data, but that's all.
But yeah, again, look at it maybe from a user perspective. So whoever uses Bonitasoft, it can be also the ERP vendor. So yeah, Bonitasoft doesn't necessarily care who accesses the BC model, right? So if that is a BC the ERP vendor, there's no restriction. Whoever assumes the role of the BC administrator can perfectly have access and connect the data points. So that can be from the end user perspective or from the ERP vendor. So there's no technical restriction for that, if that was a question. So that's one thing interesting. Do you have the answer for that? The latest. And maybe two answers to the question. That's if Bonita is able to process unstructured data. So and maybe my general answer, and then you can go into specifics with Bonitasoft, Delphine. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. In general terms, that we have seen a couple of examples where processes, BPM processes, reach into unstructured data specifically for customer attendance cases. So for example, if you have a process for customer services where you want to listen into things like semantic analytics and sentiment analytics in Twitter, for example, and use the the Twitter API key, go there, download basically the packages of data that are partially structured, and do some analytics from there. That's something we have seen. And in general terms, I would say the answer is yes. Specifically, I would need to know if there's a plugin already for that in BC, which I don't know. Delphine, do you know by any chance?
Well, actually, BC is processing unstructured data, for sure.
Cool.
To execute processes, the motor, the engine will only use a relational database, so like a MySQL, MS SQL Server, Oracle, and so on. But for external storage, so external data storage, so business data, for example, yes, you can.
Yeah, no, perfectly. You can also upload a CSV file for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then can I feed BC with prepared data from a legacy system so that I can check?
I think you answered that already. Yeah, so that's basically integrating BC to external data, and there's one slide. And once we share that, you can see that specifically. But there's one slide dedicated to that, where you can make use of the BC information from the processes, but also extend that to external applications. Yeah. So yes, the answer is that. So for example, if you want to feed in an additional application like a transactional system, in addition to the process, you can combine those two data sources.
I think we are done for today. Thank you very much for your questions. If you have more questions, feel free to ask us, Kay or myself. Let me come back to the first slide so that you have our contacts. And also, if you have questions, you can ask them on our community website in the forum section, and we will be really happy to help you. Thank you very much, Kai, for your presentation. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome, everyone. This is the last chapter of our series on methodologies and good practices for process automation project with Bonita. Today, we are going to discover what can be done after being in production in order to maximize the benefits of the first iteration and remain in a continuous improvement loop. Therefore, I am pleased to end the loop as we began it with Kai Winkler, Director of NSI Soluciones in Panama, MVP or Services Chapter at ABPMP, who will share with you his wide experience on this subject. Hello, Kai.
Hey, can you hear me well?
How are you?
All good.
Very fine. At home, as everybody.
Yes, everybody else. No, thanks for having me back. And as you can see, I grow my in isolation beard. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's great to be back and to be with you together again to finish off the video series and look after the automation, what can be done and how to improve the processes. So, and also thanks for everybody joining at this hour and asking a lot of questions, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And just to tell you that all that you are going to hear today is based on the product and our knowledge on the product. But not only that, it's also based on the experience of our partners like Kai, our consultants, me, for example, because I also have a previous experiences in this field. And more than that, a large number of comments from our users and customers who were kind enough to share with us their way of working and all their feedbacks. That's great to hear from them. So now let's quickly return on the life cycle of your project and where we are today. As you remember, we always talked about a life cycle in 5 phases. The first one, the discovery design, is the goal you want to achieve, then you are going to implement your application. So develop your application, implement everything, design it, and then in the third phase, you are going to deploy it. And that's what we have seen in the fourth chapter of this webinar. Now that your first project is deployed and is running in production, then what's next? What do you have to do? Well, in order to do that, you would have options. For example, add a new process to your application. You can think that you can improve what has been implemented based on your users' feedback. You can optimize your application further, or you can think about industrializing your application development and the deployment. To do so, you will have to monitor everything in order to be able to get KPIs, facts, feedbacks that are usable, smart, as we say. When we say smart, it's just to say that you can measure it and it's simple to implement, to optimize, and go back to another loop and iterate with a new process or a new version. But how are you going to do that? Kai, what is your opinion about that?
Well, to begin with, I think it's very important to stress the obvious, right? As you mentioned, to recognize that there's a difference between an implementation and then the ongoing maintenance, management, and improvement of the process. So while that seems maybe very common sense and obvious to everybody from a theoretical point of view, in practice, I've seen that oftentimes fail. So that there's an idea and also some sort of an infrastructure in place where you can make sure that, hey, now that we finished the project, we accomplished successfully. If you joined all our video courses and followed the steps correctly, then it will be successful. Then basically you have to change your mindset into something that now the process is not an application. So it's not necessarily something fixed, an application that has been programmed and it's there, mute and on its own. So the idea is now taking that and bringing it to the next level. And that specifically means looking at what happens within the process. And as you see here on this slide, what happens in terms of feedback the process, all the processes produce. So there are a lot of dimensions to it. And that's not the only way to start, but that's the most common and the most practical way to start with. So what we see here is that there are at least two different dimensions in terms of monitoring the process. So you have here insights that come basically from the business side of things of the process and technical insights. And when we say insights, we mean data. So in business, you have things that can help you to engage in data analytics, process analytics. And with that, optimize your processes, change your processes. And that, maybe in parentheses, is something very, very tangible. It's something very important we all face. I mean, we are talking basically here from quarantine, and we know that our business processes have to change drastically to adapt to the new reality. Be it good, for the better or the worse, we have to change. And looking at the data and looking at some platforms like the Bonitasoft BPMS, you have the tools, and basically with that insights, with those insights, you have also the know-how how to do that. And on the second side, the second dimension would be technical. So looking not only on what kind of results, measurable results, data the processes produced, also looking at how healthy is my environment. Because if we are successful, if we are looking at mission critical processes, we have most likely lots and lots of volumes we have to deal with, and we have to make sure that our solution is speedy. I mean, if you want to be all digitized and want to produce good results, we also want to create a good user experience, meaning that when our end users utilize our processes, they have to be speedy, they have to be intelligently designed, and they have to be responsive. And that's why we also look at the technical output of sites when it comes to data.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that maybe we can start, and I changed the slide, with the business side. As you said, our business is changing. It's always in movement, and here with what is happening to the world, I think we will see drastic changes as well. And that's why we need to keep monitoring and improving the processes, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. So things I've seen so far, so talking to our customers using Bonitasoft, everybody's impacted in one way or another. And many of them, of course, many of our end users and ourselves involved, we have to deal with negative impacts. But there's a silver lining. I mean, there are some advantages to take home from. And one of the advantages is, I think, silos or industries that have been kind of resistant to the fact that things have to be digitized. All the hype we saw the last couple of years, like 2 or 3 years of digital transformation, now it's not an option anymore. I mean, there's no way around. So very practical things like now we have to sign reviews and approval of different requests that go through the processes digitally. Yeah, that's not an option anymore. That has to happen. Also, that we think about multi-channel, right? So right now it's elusive to think we can easily and quickly regain brick and mortar operations, so that people go into your branch in order to do their business. Now it will be most likely digital. So it's very good timing for BPM. It's very good timing for automation. But it's very important that we know how to do that. And that's why, absolutely, the business is changing, and looking at the data, we will gather the evidence and also the how to and what to in terms of business data.
Yeah, and talking about data, I think we have a lot to say.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, so if you remember, there were two general dimensions we wanted to point out. And of course, take that with a grain of salt or two. So basically what we're trying to say, that's one way of looking at things. So one thing is to differentiate between process data, business data in general, and technical data, and drilling down a bit within data dimensions. You have process data and pure business data itself. So process data, what you see basically on the left here in green, is meant to be the set of data you get when running processes. So in general, if you look at processes, those are sets of generic data, where you see things like who did what in the process. So Kai, for example, entered in a process, pulled off a request or sent over a request to Delphine. Delphine logs in, and that generates things like timestamps, things like registries of now Kai entered at that specific point of time, this date, and then Delphine, she entered and eventually rejected the case, or looped the case back to me because there was information missing. So everything we do produces process-specific data. But generic in the sense that no matter what kind of process you look at, you always get that kind of data. Who logged in, who did what, when. So the keywords, right? And with that, you can also drive a lot of intelligence for your processes, looking at things like bottlenecks or deviations from goals. So if you want to establish some kind of goal, some KPI, to make sure that, hey, now that everything is digital, or response time, the famous time to yes, as a portion of the process. So whenever somebody requests something, somebody else reviews, and then yet another person approves something, then we have a time to yes portion of a process. We want to comply with that within a margin of 4 working hours. Then that is something very easily, if you know where and how to look for it, to control against your data. So that is basically process data. So you have a bunch of processes, and each one of those processes generates timestamps and process-specific data you can use in order to identify where am I, and also how am I complying, and more importantly, if there's a deviation, what can I do about it? And on the other side, so that's basically the blue rectangle, is everything that has to do with the business side of things. So that, in difference to process data, if you compare those two, is not generic anymore. This very much depends on what specific process you have ongoing, right? So that can be like the examples we put there, an HR process. So if it is an HR process, you basically look at the forms and the contents you cover in this process. So things like Delphine wants to go to vacation. This request gets to me, and I reject this request because there's no need for vacation. We're all on vacation right now. But you get the idea. So basically, in the HR specific form, we capture things like how many vacation days we have available. What is the period of time Delphine wants to go for vacation? So very specific things to HR. The same goes for other processes, like a banking process for loan origination or customer allocation. So if you want to do that, then most likely you have banking specific information in your forms that generates data specific to that process. And in the end, you create another set of data that is related to the business side of things. And at some point, and we will have a couple of other examples, you want to merge two things together, where you can kind of establish a narrative of what kind of impact does my response time, bottlenecks, workload have over the business data in terms of sales data, sales volumes, customer satisfaction. So the good news is a platform like Bonitasoft always generates two sets of data. And the important thing is to know that they are there, and then secondly, of course, how to access and how to use that information.
Okay, and so how are you going to do that? I mean, there you have to analyze everything.
Yeah, there's a whole field of it's a discipline, right? But specifically for Bonitasoft, you have different entries. So in Bonitasoft, you have something like the reporting engine and the Bonitasoft databases you can access. So Bonitasoft makes it easy to get to the first couple of layers where you go in as a business analyst or an authorized end user, and then pull that information from the repositories in order to start analyzing it. Or you're more like a process analyst, and instead of going into the database side of things, you go through the dashboards. So you look at the live data that's there and analyze that. So and that's why also we put in this slide yet two different or the additional dimensions to looking at data. One would be the real-time data, and the other one would be the historical data. So looking at the data side of things from that perspective, from the time perspective, the real-time data is basically for the role of a process analyst. So, and that is a bit different from a business analyst. The process analyst, one of the main missions, to put it very easily, very bluntly, is to make sure that the process complies with what we envisioned the process to do. So if one of our goals is to increase sales volumes or comply, so we want to increase the customer satisfaction, right? And that's a very generic thing. And then we drill down a bit what that actually means. So the customer satisfaction can be something that translates into responding better and faster, right? So it's something very measurable. And then the process analyst would have to make sure that we actually comply with that. So good news is that with something like Bonitasoft, you can automate much of that. And everything you don't automate, you can at least look at it. So, and that is where real-time statistics come into play. And you use things like the BAM, the BAM, the business administration monitoring of Bonitasoft in this case in terms of dashboarding. So you look at real-time statistics of how the current process is doing. So for example, if you look at some KPI we wanted to measure in real time, that may be some business data like loan allocation or sales data. So we wanted to sell X amount of products within this queue, within this quarter, or we wanted to achieve a dollar amount of sales. Then we can look at that and compare with real life data, where am I currently throughout, or with that goal in mind throughout my processes. So how much did my process make sure that we achieve that goal? And the second component for the real-time data is also, and that's a big differentiator if you look at different technologies, right? So one of the things is you can look at it and can look basically like the Bloomberg dashboard, how everything moves, and it looks very fancy. But the trick is what to do about it. And a very effective dashboard is that lets you deal with the levers behind the scenes. So for example, if you look at a result of real-time statistics, we want to allocate $300,000 in new personal loans this month. And I'm currently at $150,000. And we are today at the 23rd of April. So the month is almost over. So the idea is using this dashboard to do something about it. And one of the things I can do about it is maybe incorporating some lever associated and related to the rates, the loan rates we're going to apply, and lower it from maybe 6% to 5.5% if I have the credentials to do so. So I can kind of take action of how the process is behaving in real time and also make sure that we achieve the goals. Another thing would be not actually doing that by hand, but automating this too. So for example, if you look at workloads, and I see that the workload from Delphine is so high that whatever comes new to her is becoming bottleneck. So it's bottlenecked by Delphine because her workload is too high. I can incorporate things like response time measurements automatically in the real-time statistics, where I can say, hey, whenever you exceed a given threshold, you know what? Notify Delphine to see if there's something wrong automatically, or notify her supervisor. Or, you know what? Even better, if we exceed still the time, take the case away and assign it to somebody else in order to leverage the workload. Those are things based upon real-time statistics I can start to automate. As opposed to what you see on the other hand. There's basically what a business analyst would do, historical data, and go through all that information in order to try to identify pattern, right? Pattern recognition, to do the basics of analytics, things like understand what happened, why something happened, and see how we can use it in order to predict some future state. So descriptive analytics, prescriptive analytics, cognitive analytics, kind of things. Where also you open up the gateway to data science, right? Where you kind of use that information not only to describe what, how, and what you can do about it, but also incorporate that into some machine learning algorithms in order to improve some specifics of your process. And going back, basically, we have two components regarding time, something you can use in order to take specific actions while it's still happening with process analysts. And then you look at pattern and existing conditions with historical data with business analysts. But both sets are there.
Okay.
So that was a long answer to a short question.
Yes, and if you want, I can illustrate what you are talking about with 2 or 3 examples coming from Bonita. The first one here, okay, it's okay. And this one is a dashboard made with Bonita UI Designer to express the real-time dashboard, real-time monitoring based on process data. Here we are talking about trading system, and they are following up suppliers and customers references and trading stuff. The most important here, if I come on the slide, is the fact that you can see here how is running and the progress of each case. I mean, for example, the operation manager will be able to see how many tasks have been done in this case. For example, you can see as well on a very easily way, because it's colored, you have a kind of alerting on the risk to exceed the SLA and not meet the goals, the objectives. And here you can see it's green because you have no risk to be late. But here you can see that as you have only done 1 task over 7, and the request should be done quite soon, it's really risky and it's really urgent to meet the SLA, but maybe we'll have to take actions on that. Then if we take another kind of report based on business data. Here, the example is a technical team monitoring quality on different teams and machines. I mean, you have employees working in support team and making sure that the machines are running. They can be electrical, they can be mechanical. So you have different kinds of supplies. And they need to make sure that you maintain a certain level of service, level of quality, of availability, and performance on each machine, each supply, and for each employee that is running and owning their machine. All the information here has been done with the UI designer as well, based on the information retrieved in the business data model that is included in Bonita as well. So you will get all the business data that you will need in a dashboard to make sure that you have the right level, the right information. And for example, we can use colors with this widget as well, for example, in order to make sure that you are aligned with the success metrics you had defined before implementing the project in production, or that you have decided with your manager, for example. Here, as you can see, we use different types of widgets. Here you have information coming from another form, and it could be possible, for example, to mix data coming from the process, which means that, for example, you need to make sure that you maintain availability to 80% and you finish all the tasks before, I don't know, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and you switch off the machine, I don't know, and that's an example. But you could mix both of them, process and data. The only thing that is important is to use different widgets, because with Bonita, at least, if you use the same widgets to talk about different kind of data that are coming from different database, then you could have conflicts in the scripts and the requests. I don't know, Kai, if you have another example of connection between process and business data, or if I go on another report.
Yeah, no, maybe here the only thing, and it's a nice dashboard. So independent of the technology you use, I think it's always important to keep in mind good and best practices. So again, we are looking at what happens after you implement it, right? You're done and you have to start measuring. And usually the first couple of processes, people get very excited and create a whole bunch of dashboards with indicators, widgets all over the place. And while that may be graphically impressive, it doesn't necessarily add value, right? So in a good dashboard, usually you have something like you see here that is not necessarily cluttered with a whole bunch of different indicators, but maybe some 3-4 indicators that really make the difference of what the process ought to do. So, and if you eventually, some of you recall the original, when we kicked off the entire series, one of the things we want to make sure before we automate is define strategic goals, right? And here's basically making sure that we have the indicators in place that contribute results to do specific strategic goals. And also another good practice is to put conflicting indicators together. So for example, if you look at, hey, I want to measure sales, right? The volume of sales in dollar amounts. So if I put that alone, it's helpful, and I can drill it down by branch, by region, and whatnot. The classical dashboards you always see. But the important thing is to find something that influences and kind of counteracts in order to do something about it, since we are speaking still about live data, right? So usually it's very easy to comply with sales. So I can sell a whole bunch of things if I lower the price to 0, as we see currently with the barrels of petrol. So yeah, and it's not even easy then, but still, as an example, right? So I can influence basically my sales volume by risk or by price. And it would be a good idea to put those two indicators together to see how one influences the other and find the balance, because that is in the end the science of the data analytics side of things, and also looking at your processes. But yeah, good example.
And that's maybe where BI can help as well, because, for example, if I take the next report here, it's more a report based on process data. It's an historical report where you have analyzed and monitored the processes and the cases where you were on time, where you had risk to be late, and you were late. And this kind of report, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm quite sure that this one could be easily included in a BI tool, and you could have a good connection to make sure that you can compare, and then, as you said, have better analysis. And that's why I go to the next slide, because I think it's totally linked.
Yep. Yeah. So here, what you see here is basically just a quick example. Where okay, the core message here would be basically being aware that BPMS is not in the business of replacing business analytics, business intelligence, or nothing of the sort. So it's just there to kind of open the doors and to provide you with the basics of data to get started within your processes. But it's perfectly compatible, but also suggested that you extend once, and it always has to do and comes back to maturity. So once you have a certain level of understanding what kind of data you have, how to use it, how to use it, and how to access it, then you probably want to go to the next step and extend this information to external tools, external business analytic tools, or business intelligence tools. So that was a quick example we did yesterday, where we kind of threw process and business data over to Soho Analytics, one of many available tools for that, right? So you have things like Power BI, you have Tableau, Soho Analytics, and a bunch of others, right? Very good tools in that realm. And the idea is not substituting that in any ways, but also making sure that the data is compatible and perfectly accessible. And I think that is one of the advantages that you get with Bonitasoft. So you can easily extend your sets of data in order to say, I want to go to the next step. And the next step meaning engage into something more predictive, right? So what you saw, and where something like Bonitasoft does an awesome job is visualizing process data, business data, basically everything that goes through the processes. But if you want to then establish something like time series, where you want to go through tendencies and say, well, with a statistical significance of R squared of something like 80% or maybe even more, the next number in terms of sales allocation will be XYZ. So that is something where you would start to look at a BI tool like Tableau or Power BI, or it's like as you see here, Soho Analytics. And then also go steps further with things like Python, R, SAS, or RapidMiner, where you kind of go into and engage in what is known as process mining, data mining, semantic analytics, and whatnot. So basically, the idea is being aware that you can, and also that you ought to go the next couple of steps for continuous process improvements with data from there forward.
Yeah, and that's a good transition to the conclusion on this section.
Yeah, the very appetizing peanut butter jelly sandwich we have there. So the idea is that BPM as a concept, right? As a concept, is perfectly compatible and mixes very well with data analytics. So everything that has to do with data science, data analytics, BI is supposed to work hand in hand. So maybe if somebody asks me what to do first and how do I start, just make sure that you design your processes well. You looked at things that really make a difference, not only for the stockholders, but also the stakeholders, and most importantly, the end users of your company. And with that in mind, make sure that all the variables you need for running the processes are there. And once they're there, be assured that you will end up with a bunch of databases behind the scenes that accumulatively will get enriched the longer the process run. And then with that, you can engage in all sorts of data science aspects and activities. Yeah, peanut butter jelly.
Yeah. Well, okay, data looks good, as we can see, but I think that's not the only thing that is important, no? We have to talk about organization. We were during the first webinar, we were talking about strategy, personas, things like that. What about the organization? You have a clear idea about that, I think, no?
Yeah. So again, technology without people is kind of a mute point. So you need to make sure that there's a structure. As I stated initially when we started, that it's very important to make sure that you have the data, you have the tools, and you have platforms like Bonita in order to make things work. Yeah, but usually without the right people and without the right methodology, things start to fail. So, and there is a second component that comes into play when it comes to continued enhancements, continued improvements after the fact that we did the first implementation, the first iteration. An iteration, that's a conscious term I use because the idea is that per mission critical process, you do at least 3 or 4 iterations a year. So the processes are supposed to change. If you have a process that's so perfect and nobody touches this in a couple of years, then usually there's something wrong with it. And in order to make that happen and to make that happen right, one of the suggestions, frameworks and concepts like the APPMP, the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, for example, in what they have, the common body of knowledge suggests, and I don't say it's the only way, is to create some center of excellence. So a center of excellence is basically a department, and that doesn't mean that Kai, Delphine, and a bunch of other people have to be hired full time just to do that, but at least that there are people assigned to and responsible and knowledgeable for what you see here on screen. So basically making sure that there's a center of excellence for people that are responsible for the processes in terms of business control, what we just saw, but also translating all those things into technology, the strategic directions and operations, and creating that department. And that's a whole section. I mean, we can and hopefully host soon a webinar around those things, of what it actually means to create such a center, what are the steps, the roles, the resources. But for now, just be aware that something like this is not only like the dot over the I, but it's actually something expected as well in order to make a long-term success or achieve long-term success with BPM. So basically, a couple of benefits. And it's very straightforward, very common sense. So you have things you want to achieve in terms of efficiency, quality, and whatnot. So, but efficiency is focused more on how to make the processes better. So that is also a benefit you get with automating processes themselves. And if you correlate that correctly and extrapolate a bit, you won't see many new benefits different from what you heard already about the benefits of automation. So in that sense, the Center of Excellence is to be understood more as a catalyst, an enabler of already existing BPM benefits. So going for making things faster, more efficient, less waste, holds true here as well. So it is not necessarily different from that, but making sure that it actually happens not only once in the initial project, but continuously, right? And a key aspect is to what you see when we speak about a network. So this doesn't mean necessarily the physical networking, but the conceptual network in terms of communication. So one of the biggest responsibilities of the Center of Excellence for BPM holds is making sure that there's a fluent and formal communication that adheres to certain standards, be it making sure that we have sufficient and efficient process documentation in place using standards like, for example, the modeling notation, UML, but also other artifacts that they are in place, continuously updated and improved upon, and that this information flows to all the stakeholders that have to do with automation to make sure that everybody understands why, how, and what we are going to do. Yeah. So in the end, as always, it always is supposed to translate into monetary benefits in terms of return on investment and other things.
Okay, and just quickly, that's where you want to go further and build a full competency model.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody wants to, and again, that's from the APPMP, from the Association of Business Process Management Professionals. So if somebody wants to certify in a formal manner to do standards, to do frameworks and concepts, they can do so. So per role, and there are others as well, right? But being knowledgeable about the fact that per role, in this case, a process analyst, an architect, or the chief process architect, each of those levels of maturity have a formalized path for a formalized certification. In this case, the process associate, the professional, and the business leader.
Okay, that's great, because here we have the whole strategy in order to monitor and optimize all the, well, I would say, business model and all the organization. But in order to support that, you have to keep in mind that you don't have to forget that you need a platform that will be robust enough, scalable enough, and well maintained to support all your processes and what you are going to define in your strategy. That's why the other side of the optimization is really to maintain, to monitor, and to improve your platform as well. So if we start with the maintenance of the platform, if I take Bonita example, the process administrator will be able to monitor the open and archived cases, manage the applications, resources, manage the business data model, access control, and also work directly in production on the platform to perform what we talk live updates. Why? Because Bonita has been built in order to make sure that the administrator would get a direct access from Bonita portal to all the administration resources, in order not to have to deploy a new release each time you want to do a change. That's where we have the live updates, where you can change, if you configured it before in the studio in your first iteration, for example, the parameters change, the connectors, widgets, and sometimes the forms as well, in order to make sure that, for example, if you have to fix something quickly, you will be agile and your users won't have to wait until you release a new version of your process before having an update and a fix for their issue. Then, and if I take examples like that, you will see that the administrator will have a graphical view of all the thing it needs to monitor. I have not had it here. That something that is also very interesting is the graphical view of your process. You can see each step, and you will have in the steps the cases that are healthy, that you can see in green here in the table, that will be in green as well. And you will see, for example, if there are cases with failures at some step of the process, you will see them in red as well. So you can see exactly where you have to take actions. And that's something you can do quickly in the tabs by filtering by process name, for example, versions, and activate. So you can take actions when you are an administrator, or on a macro view, or on a very specific way. As the production environment it's crucial to ensure runtime to correctly work. As I said, you have to ensure reliability, scalability, robustness. You have to make sure it will be agile and adapt to the changes that we talked about before. So you monitor your processes, but you will also make sure that your platform is robust enough and it's serving the needs of your users in terms of capacity, of rapidity, and so on. So with Bonita, for example, if we take the example of our platform, you will have also the ability to monitor the engine. And that's important because then it will help you sizing and tuning your servers on a precise way. So we will help you properly size, tune your production environment to make sure that it will reach the performance you are expected. And it will be done at various levels. First of all, the hardware. For example, you can work work on the CPU usage, on the memory usage. If you use containers, for example, Docker, you can work on logs in order to make sure that you will get enough information. Talking about the JVM, you're going to work on the heap and the threads. That's something we had already talked about in our last chapter, and that is available in the documentation. But you are going also to work on data. And for example, if you want to act on your application server, you are going to work on the database connection pool, for example, the number of workers as well in the engine, your database, the number of connections, how the transactions are working, the size of your database. Just talking about that, if you have a big workload, that's important as well. And finally, the application itself, the response time, the workload you will allow, and then you will have to think about it when you are designing your processes. And as I said before, you will start thinking about it before going in production, and you will optimize it by monitoring when you are in production. So in order to do it efficiently, you will get, for example, from Bonita, a series of technical and Bonita related metrics that can be by default or that you can add optionally. For example, you can monitor the current running works, the pending works, the queue, or, for example, the number of connector works. That's very important as connectors and workers are combined together, and that the performance can be affected by issues with them as well. If you want details, sorry, that's what I was thinking about. If you want more details, you can refer to the documentation or the blog that is linked here in the slides. So we were talking about the engine. Your engine has to be robust, but also it has to be scalable. And that's very important as well. Why? Because you cannot predict the future. You will try to using the data, the process analytics, all what we talked about before, but you cannot predict everything. And sometimes you can have unpredictable peaks of loads, changes in the organization. Your company can buy another one where you will have to double the number of users. I don't know, but this can happen. And you want to make sure that you will give the same level of service to your users. So if it's critical, you have to think about scalability. And how can you do that? By analyzing the use cases. What are the processes about? What are they doing? For whom? How are they interacting? How critical are they? You have to better understand the goals and the limitation of what you have deployed in order to iterate and iterate on the processes, but also on the configuration of your platform. The final goal is to guarantee the user satisfaction. How you are going to do that? You are going to scale vertically by adding CPUs, adding memory, but also horizontally in order to, for example, guarantee high availability, adding nodes, putting active clusters in order to make sure that you will be performant and have the service every time. But there is another option. if you want to get rid of all those maintenance stuff, make sure that your service will be adapted and agile depending on the workload, on the users, on the service needs. You have another option, which is requiring to be hosted by another provider. We all know AWS. Customers can, for example, build a private cloud. You can use AWS. Bonita, for example, is using AWS for some processes. You can use Azure or other clouds, or you can use Bonita Cloud. But here, what is important is the fact that thanks to cloud providers, you will be able to scale with the customer business needs. How? You will enable more environment rapidly if it's needed. You will make sure that the infrastructure is going to scale with the usage needs, especially, for example, if your process has peaks, it can be very important. You will avoid the burden of provisioning scaling. Then it will help accelerating innovation. For example, if I talk about Bonita Cloud, you will be able to be on the latest version of Bonita all the time, because if you are in the cloud, our teams are going to upgrade for you. You will have access to full continuous delivery approach and tools for an iterative application development, and that's something that works pretty well if you want to be successful. Step by step, iterate and automate. And for example, you will also have the option to reduce costs, not only by scaling, but also because you will have a no-ops offer. So you will have no initial provisioning investments. You will also have a continuity of service that will be guaranteed, because a cloud provider always has SLAs, and it will be able to offer strict SLAs that maybe in your organization you are not going to meet. Then, and finally, and that's important as well, your applications will be secured. For example, you have the AWS certifications, which are high. In Bonita, for example, we collaborate as well with cybersecurity experts for continuous security reinforcement. You can make sure that you will have privacy and security if you build a private cloud as well. And when you refer to an infrastructure as a service partner, they are obliged to provide strong security certifications. So security is always here with this option. So if you need flexibility, if you don't have resources internally to maintain your platform, and if you also want to make sure that your environment, if it's critical, can be performant, that can be an option. In any case, except if you are in a cloud environment, because Bonita, for example, will do it for you, you have to think about your iterations and upgrades in production. And that's something important as well. Why? Because upgrading is not like clicking on a button. For example, on my Mac, sometimes I have updates and they say, oh, click, and I click in 2 seconds, it's done. No, because here you have data. As Kai said before, you have a lot of data, and those data change regularly. And more than that, you have connectors that are integrated with other systems. So everything is totally integrated and has to remain consistent, even if you change your Bonita version. So you have to think and anticipate how you are going to release and think about your project release cycle versus Bonita release cycle. We have two releases per year, so that's a way to identify clearly how you want to do. Then you have to be consistent with your development upgrades and make sure that, for example, if in order to avoid errors, human errors, that you use end-to-end automation. And of course, test your upgrades in pre-production, before doing that in production, in order to avoid issues with your data, for example. So if I conclude, we are in a continuous improvement of your application, but also of your platform. So you have to identify bottlenecks and dysfunctions. You have to compare success metrics and real results to make sure that you are still aligned. Talk to your users. Tools are not going to do everything. As Kai said, human is the core of your processes and your optimization. So get their feedback. Iterate to improve. It's better to do step by step than trying to do everything in a row and fail. And then automate a maximum, because then you will be faster, more efficient, and you will avoid human errors. So we still have 5 minutes, and we are almost done of the series as well. You should have everything you need to go on, and then you can ask questions about it. We will remain at your disposal. So I will let Kai conclude on our methodology series. It's a good way to close the loop, I think.
Yeah, sure. So basically, here we draw also some parallels to existing methodologies and frameworks, right? Here, for example, if you see on the right, the small graphic from the APPMP, the most important thing to rescue here is to structure and make it, as you rightly stated, Delphine, an iterative approach. So something where you still, yesterday, for example, with a group of users, we went through the advantages versus disadvantages in order to do something like digital transformation, right? So why we all want to transform for the better and actually transform, so meaning that we do something significantly different as we did before, it doesn't mean we do have to do everything at once. So do that as a structured and iterative progressive approach. And with that, you see the project phases, and we are currently basically at phase 5, phase 6, where we kind of take everything into account, but not only relying exclusively on data, but also mix that together with the right set of people and the right set of methodology in order to kind of instrument the data and ensure success with that. And most importantly, as you see here at the last point, embrace change and have fun. And that may be difficult to do nowadays, but still, the good news is we can. We have the data, we have the people, we can train ourselves and follow approved methodology in order to make those things happen. So yeah, the journey is basically that: prepare, execute well, be conscious about the phases of the project, take the data, take the people, analyze, and improve upon that.
Yeah, that's right. And at Bonita, we have fun with Bonita, so we are aligned. Thank you very much, Kai. That was a pleasure to do that again with you. I always like to do those webinars with you. I see that we have few questions. We still have 2 minutes for you, because then you have
to run to next meeting.
Yes, exactly. But just in case, I can stay 5 minutes more in order to answer other questions if needed. So, which report tool is used to create the dashboard? Dominic, I don't know if you which dashboard you are talking about. It depends. So if I come back to the dashboards quickly, we have dashboards that are created using the UI designer. So you can use the widgets that are in UI designer. You add your dashboards, then you add the layout and the structure, and you can, thanks to the contract and the use of the BDM, or thanks to APIs that are going to do requests in the engine, you can build dashboards like that, even with the community versions, yes. With the enterprise version, the difference is that you are going to use fragments if you want. But in the community, you can do this kind of dashboard. If you are talking about this report is coming from an add-on in Bonita that is called BC, Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement, based on Elasticsearch, and also retrieving data from the processes and the cases and doing predictions.
Exactly. Here the importance of the BC is not limited by Bonitasoft data, right? So you can also use that in order to get external data sources and incorporate that into your dashboards too, right?
Yeah. I hope it answers your questions. And then okay, Mutu, I see you ask if we could have this sample model to learn and to use in education. I'm not sure to understand what you talk about when you say sample model.
Yeah, so maybe, okay, yeah, maybe if I read that right, and then I have to run. Yeah, it's basically for training. So if that is, and I may be wrong, but if that is the question, Bonitasoft does have a formal training setup. So if you want to learn and practice and use examples in order to see how this is done, Bonitasoft has courses. You can do also online and certify yourself and learn exactly the specifics on the from a practical perspective. And usually companies like ourselves, like NSI, we complement that with practical coaching. For example, if somebody wants to certify, but wants to have like a couple of sessions, like practical sessions where you train and use real data in order to see how you do that for your own information, then we can complement that with services. But basically, it's just a matter of requesting it, and either Bonitasoft and or somebody like a partner can help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I've got to run. So yeah.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
know,
again,
Kai.
Delphine.
Thank you very much. That
Thanks
was a
everybody.
real pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. I don't know if we have another question. I can take a last question. I'm sorry we were a bit tight on time, but we had a lot to say in this section. Just something I wanted to tell you. If you want to get more details about scalability, about the engine monitoring, or as well about process analytics, we have videos on YouTube that are going deeper into details. And if you have questions, of course, or I remain at your disposal, or you can go to the community website and ask your questions, and we will answer, of course. I have a last question. Is Bonita able to process unstructured data? From John. Actually, yes, it is. It is using, so the data will be, you can come from your database, as we said, Elasticsearch, or for example, you can use a MongoDB, and it will be retrieved through API to be used. But it's kind of, you will need to develop a bit to process it. BC is only enterprise? Yes, it is. It is an enterprise module. We are currently working in the teams and the process labs on process analytics. I still don't know how it will be done. We are working on it in order to make sure that we use process analytics, process mining, and we create something totally well, usable, as we said. But for the time being, we have stopped the development on BC in order to make sure that we align with the process analytics and process mining research. Let's conclude this webinar. I want to thank you all and take care of you, especially in those times. you will have the video within a few days, the maximum. If you have other questions, feel free to ask. And it was a pleasure to do this series about methodologies and practices. We tried to do blog posts out of it so that you can still have information and use it if you need. Thank you. Have a good day or a good evening, and talk to you soon on other subjects. Bye-bye.